Good morning all, and thank you for being with us today. The title of our event, which celebrates 15 years of language teacher education at UL, the title is Looking Back, Looking Forward, and Successful Stories that our graduates are going to share with us. Looking back meant for us the various journeys that you undertook since you left us, and also the journey that you had while you were at UL and in your various school placements. Looking forward will probably require a bit of reflection, and that's what we are going to aim at today, at strengthening the links that you have with us and that your schools have with the University of Limerick, and in the process, forging new paths for the future. So let me recap a small bit too on the actual development of the program, because some of you here are graduates of the Graduate Diploma of Education, some of you of the PDE, and some of you of the PME. So when we started in 2005, the languages that were offered were German, French, Japanese, Spanish, and ESL. Three colleagues come to mind that have worked hard towards instigating this program were Janet Moody from Education, Jean Conacher from the Languages and Cultural Studies School, and Caroline Graham from the Language Center. So going forward 5 years, we integrated Irish among the languages. So we now count 6 languages that are offered to our students. Another milestone was in 2014, the PDE, which was called around roughly 2012, the PDE became a PME, meaning that the 1-year course became a 2-year course. That meant for us to revise modules, to expand, and even to create new modules, keeping in mind always that we wanted students to have language pedagogy and language per se. When we say language per se, we mean language and cultural studies and approach. So that PME was actually made the one common structure in 2018, sorry about that. And how it has transpired is that by being a common structure, students can now avail of the various disciplines within that program, which means in our case, instead of having 2 languages, some students now can have 1 language with 1 non-language subject. For example, this year, we are welcoming students who are going to do French and business. Others are going to do German and music, Irish and maths. So that's quite exciting for us. And also in the process of this PME development, Catherine, who is going to talk to you later, has played a role in including a new dimension, which is blended learning, which is actually bring on online resources. You wonder if the timing was meant, but I'm sure that some of the students benefited from this introduction to new technologies. So maybe to mention here, in case we forget later, is that the program in its infancy got very earlier on in 2006 the European language label. It was recognized as something very new and very promising, and I think it was. And when you look at the number of graduates with us today, when you look at how the presenters have very willingly offered to be with us today, I can say, for what I know, I can say that student engagement is vibrant with us. And thank you. Interesting how I called you student. You know the way my graduates will always be my students. So wishing you all a very good morning with us. Bonne chance à tous et à tout à l'heure.
It's my great pleasure to introduce the first speaker today, Laura Droog, who graduated from the PME in 2019.
Hello, my name is Laura Droog. I am a graduate of the Professional Master of Education Languages programme here at the University of Limerick. I graduated from the programme last year and started teaching in September at the school where I did my final year placement. In this presentation, I would like to focus on the challenges I faced regarding pupil engagement both before and during COVID-19. One thing that has always stood with me from my time at UL is that students must be placed at the centre of the learning process. This guiding principle has informed my practice, particularly when it comes to student engagement. I am about to embark on my first year as a fully qualified Irish teacher, having completed the Droichead programme during the previous school year. My first year was full of challenges, the most notable being getting disinterested and at times troublesome students to engage. I tried many strategies with these students. However, on reflection, I realised that it was the combined use of all of these strategies that led to the desired outcome, engagement. Here is my recipe for success. You must be sincere. Students are very perceptive and will quickly realise whether or not you do actually care. Make sure they feel included in the class. Regularly check up on them. Praise and encourage. Look for opportunities to praise and encourage. They are there. Reward good behaviour. Reward engagement. And finally, give them your spare time to help them with project work. This shows them that you do actually care. The most valuable thing you can give to anyone is your time. And students pick up on this. Getting a lot of my students to engage in the online environment wasn't easy. It was a steep learning curve, not just for me, but also for my students. Giving work little, but often keeps students engaged, especially the younger years. In this way, I was kept abreast of where exactly students were having challenges. Also, if students are asked to submit a relatively small piece of work within a 24-hour period, they are more likely to complete that work. When correcting student work, do focus on one or two things that need to be improved upon, but don't forget to praise what they did well. This gives them encouragement. I often received a "thanks, miss" in the comment section on Google Classroom. Instead of automatically escalating lack of student engagement up the chain of command, send a message to the student. There is often a good reason why students aren't engaging. By contacting them directly, you can find a workable solution. In times of crisis, we need to be even more flexible and understanding. Ask your students what method of teaching is most effective for them. Some students don't have access to good broadband, and so downloading video or audio files isn't an option for them. Some students don't have a laptop or a printer at home. We need to be aware of these disparities and provide workable solutions. There will be days, weeks even, when you will doubt if you are a good teacher. I don't always get it right, but I always strive to reflect, to learn from past mistakes and to grow. This is something that was instilled in me during my time at UL. This is a letter I received from a student at the end of this school term. It is, and will forevermore, be a reminder of why I chose to be a teacher.
Okay, everyone, I think you can hear me if you can't see me. So thank you very much to Laura for her talk. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Nicole McCarthy, who graduated in 2019.
Hi there, and welcome to my presentation entitled Enhancing Pupil Engagement While Facing the Challenges of Online Teaching and Learning. My name is Nicole McCarthy and I'm a French teacher in County Limerick. So the first 2 weeks of the lockdown and teaching online was quite difficult. The students, there wasn't 100% engagement with the students, and they were struggling quite a bit with using the different technology that was involved. We ended up doing quite a lot of hours per day, myself personally anyway, I'm not sure about the rest of the teachers, just to try and kind of get on top of everything. Because every single piece of work that came into me, I would actually correct every single thing. Now I have over 150 students, or I had last year, so that took some time. And then responding to all the student emails as well that were coming in at all hours of the day. That took a little bit of getting used to. So eventually I kind of found a bit more of a rhythm and a pattern. In terms of correcting work, I would just kind of give general feedback to individual students and then upload the corrections, which made life much easier for both me and the students as well. Now, obviously it wasn't all difficult. There was a lot of success in this as well. So with my first years, just to keep them engaged as much as possible, I asked them what they wanted to learn themselves. And you can see there I used Menti, which is something that we used quite a lot in UL. We weren't actually taught to use it. We just used it in a lot of tutorials, which was fantastic. And it kind of showed me that you can use this very, very easily with students. They don't need anything except the code. So you can see there that they wanted to study mostly animals, food, sports, and verbs. So we did that. With my fifth years, I wanted them really involved in their assessment. I saw that they were doing really well in a Study Clicks quiz. So another online resource, which is fantastic. They have ready-made quizzes there for most subjects. They don't have junior cycle stuff there for languages, but they do have lots of senior cycle stuff there. So as I said, I saw that they were doing really well, and I wanted them to kind of let me know if they wanted that result then included in their final result for the summer. And for another example, with my second years, we played a lot of games on Kahoot, which is fantastic. We did that a couple of times as well in UL. And you can just see there, they kind of saw like the leaderboard who was coming in top, and they have that graph there, which is bringing back in numeracy, which is obviously very important as well across all subject areas. So as I said, I wanted students involved in the assessment, so I did ask them what they wanted included in it. We went through a lot of trial and error, so kind of getting the students to do mock exams so that no student would be disadvantaged and so that they would know exactly what kind of was coming towards them in the final assessment. As I said, I used free websites. I used FlexiQuiz, which is what I'm going to show you in the next slide. I'm just going to go through the first year exam just to show you how easy it is to make a free exam that's accessible to every single person, no matter what device they're using, as long as they have some form of internet. And as well, I'm just going to show you how I used multiple choice questions, mostly instead of writing, but I did have a little bit of writing as well. But the idea here was that students wouldn't have to use accents on the letters because they didn't know how to use them on their phone or on their laptop. And then I thought that might lead to them omitting the accents then when doing actual written work in exams or back in school. So that was something as well that I found very important. So this is the first year exam. So I'm just going to talk you through it quickly. So I used FlexiQuiz, which as I said is a free quiz. It can show you up to 20 results for free if you have more than 20 students in the one group. You do have to pay a small fee, but you can also just split it into two groups and you can have as many students as you want and get as many results as you want for free. So we'll just go through it very quickly. So the students just have to enter their name, so their first name, surname and class group, and they don't have to register any personal details other than that. The name is just so that I know who they are. So obviously I couldn't talk them through the quiz, so I just gave them like a little kind of pep talk at the beginning, just to kind of go through what's going to happen in the exam. They had already done a mock exam, so that's fine. And then at the beginning, then we just had a fill in the blanks exercise with verbs. Then we had just changing sentences from positive to negative. So all they had to do was add in the words to make it negative. We had multiple choice questions. We had a few of those. We had some more fill in the blanks, some more multiple choice questions, and some more fill in the blanks. So it was quite easy. The last fill in the blanks there was literally they could just copy and paste the word into the correct box. So it was very simple for them. There was nothing too complicated. And as I said, I had already done a test like that, and I had given them a little video to kind of go through exactly what was happening in each section. So that has been my presentation on how I kind of kept my students engaged while online teaching and learning. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for listening.
It was great to hear about your experience, Nicole. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Siobhan Bailey for the third talk of this morning.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Siobhan Bailey, and I'm a French and German teacher in County Limerick. I'm delighted to join you today for this very special occasion, celebrating 15 years of language teaching at UL. The title of my presentation today is Promoting Language Learning Within a DEIS School Setting, a Personal Reflection. During my presentation, I will discuss some of the challenges I've faced with the teaching of languages in a DEIS school, as well as how our MFL department has worked to overcome these challenges and promote language learning both among our local and school community. In my experience as both a language teacher and as a language learner, it is my belief that every school in Ireland has a certain culture of language learning, be it positive or negative. I have found that in a DEIS school where students come from socially disadvantaged backgrounds, language learning is simply not a priority for many. Simply put, many of our students do not see the benefits or opportunities which can come from foreign language learning. They are unable to visualise themselves travelling abroad for work, study, and/or leisure. For many students in a DEIS school, they seem resigned to a life in their hometown or county. Unfortunately for all stakeholders, despite the numerous initiatives and promotions which can and have been introduced, I believe that sometimes when there is a culture within a community, it is very difficult to change this. Language teaching in its nature has changed even since I was a student in secondary school. Gone are the days of the book and copy, rote learning, and/or chalk and talk style of teaching, which is what I'm sure many of us have experienced at some stage. Within my own classroom, I've applied a number of techniques which I learned from studying at UL. These include task-based learning, teaching through the target language, and active learning. Group work forms an integral part of all of my lessons, and students work together in the majority of learning tasks. I've also tried to introduce games into my teaching wherever suitable, which have helped to make learning fun and enjoyable for all. Outside of the classroom, my colleagues and I have worked hard to promote languages within our entire school community. For example, all of our classroom and purpose-built classrooms have been labelled with their titles in English, Irish, French, German and Spanish. 2 years ago, we were lucky enough to have had a French language assistant, and she did great work with our students, particularly in preparing our 6th years for their oral exams. Last year, we decided to hold a Languages Week, which coincided with the European Day of Languages on September 26th. Events throughout the week included a language challenge booklet and t-shirt design competition, which was run by the Council of Europe for all students in the school, a foreign language film screening for all first and second year students, a food tasting event for all students and staff, and an international and student and teacher language profiles. The food tasting event was the biggest event in terms of organisation. The transition year class cooked crepes for all students and staff in the school. They spent a few weeks beforehand creating decorations for the space. French and Spanish music was played to create a cafe feel. Everyone really enjoyed the event and it created a great buzz around the school. Language profiles were created to celebrate all the different languages and cultures in our school. Some international students were interviewed and were asked questions about what languages they speak, when and where they speak their native language, and whether they feel if languages are important for young people. These profiles were on display for the entire school to see, and all students who took part, particularly the exchange students from Italy and Spain, felt very welcome and that the school was taking an interest in them and where they come from. While the Languages Week was a lot of work, it was a huge success and we got excellent feedback from students and staff. As a department, we have committed to making it an annual event. However, as with everything else this year, COVID-19 will mean that we won't be able to celebrate Languages Week as before. Looking to the future, we intend to continue promoting language learning in our school by organising more foreign trips abroad. We had a trip to Paris scheduled for this October. However, this has been put on hold until next year. My colleagues and I would also like to set up a school exchange with French and Spanish schools. However, this is a long-term goal which will probably take a few years. I find that as I'm not from the area, it is more challenging as you first need to make connections within the local community before exploring the idea of twinning. So that has been my presentation and I would like to thank you so much for listening. Finally, I would also like to extend a huge congratulations to the university and staff, but particularly all the lecturers and tutors, both past and present, who have worked so hard to inspire and motivate language students from all over the world. Your hard work and dedication has left a lasting effect on all of your students, which will go on to inspire a whole new generation of language learners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. I'm going to pass on the mic to Jane now, who is going to give us a list of the questions that were asked during these talks, which presented great examples of initiatives to engage pupils and create positive learning experiences.
Thanks a million, Stephanie. I'm going to ask the three presenters from that session to turn on your mics and your cameras now, so you can get the praise that you deserve from everybody in the audience. So while you're doing that, I just want to address a couple of the lovely comments that came in from the attendees. So Katrine Janot said, impressed by recent graduates, they were thrown in it with COVID this year and they rose to the challenge, which I think everyone will agree with. And Janet says, it's wonderful to hear the thoughtful professionalism of these young teachers. We hear so much bad news that it's great to hear about their creativity and their care for students. So I just thought we'd start with some lovely positives there before we get into the questions. Oh, and Jean Conner says, great selection of presentations underlining the importance of maintaining student and teacher motivation, particularly in difficult times. So the first question is for Laura, if you were there. Laura?
Yes, I'm here.
Thanks, and thank you for your presentation. So this question came in from Natasha, and she said, you mentioned that giving little work and often was key for you to keep your students engaged. Could you give some examples of small tasks that you feel worked well for this?
For example, with my first years, trying to engage my first years, I found that giving small tasks was key to kind of progress their learning. So for example, I had the aim of, I wanted my first years to be able to write a paragraph on sports that they were interested in and sports personalities. So in order to get to that objective, we did a couple of matching exercises with the various sports. So matching the sports to the pictures. And then they would, so this was in one of their Irish books, in their Irish book, and they would send me in a picture of the matching exercise when it was completed. Then we moved on to sentence structure. So in Irish, you either do sport or you either do a certain sport or you play a sport. So you've two different verbs associated with sports. So you've Dainam and Imrim. So we did exercises with that. So which sports do you do and which sports do you play? Then we focused on adjectives, and let's say for certain sports you might have to be strong. So let's say with boxing, caithfidh tú a bheith loidir. So we then did various writing different sentences connected with different sports and the adjectives connected with those sports. And then we moved on to comparatives and superlatives. So we did an exercise on that, and they were able then to tie those exercises in with writing about their sports personalities. So for example, let's say with Katie Taylor, you might say she is stronger than whoever. So tá Katie Taylor níos loidre no. So they would be comparing then their sports personalities. So I did lots of little exercises to get them then to that the main aim of being able then to put together a whole paragraph on the sports that they play, and then writing about their sports personalities and being able then to compare their sports personalities that they liked.
That sounds fantastic. And I think that's something that in various languages we could all take into the classrooms ourselves. Thank you so much, Laura. I'm just going to ask two more. I've got one specifically for Nicole and one for Siobhan, and then we're going to move on to the next session, just because unfortunately, I know we could talk about this all day, but we are a little bit pressed for time. So thank you so much, Laura. So Nicole, your question is a nice little one. Is there any distance learning activity which you intend to keep when going back to school?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Google Classroom is going to become very important, just in terms of we won't be able to take up homework. So, you know, they can interact there, they can submit their homework. For example, fifth years with their little essays, they could just take a picture and upload it. Flexi quiz, I think I'm going to continue with, because the students absolutely love it. You can actually, as I said, it's all free, and you can even get like a little certificate that the students can download if they pass the test or the quiz, whatever it is, and you can set kind of the pass rate. So like if you want them to pass at 20%, 50%, whatever it is. And I think as well, Kahoot, it's a lot of people seem to not kind of know how to use it fully. There's the live kind of Kahoot, the questions come up on the screen and the students have the option of the 4 different colors, but there's actually a competition section as well, where you can kind of set a time limit. So you could say it's due tomorrow at midday, and I noticed that a lot of the students didn't know that, and I only figured it out by accident. So that's something they could even do for homework rather than kind of a written exercise and then submitting it to Google Classroom. So there's a few kind of, I think most of what I used during lockdown I will continue to use, just to kind of keep up that kind of interaction.
Great to have these new resources that maybe we didn't exploit as much as we could have before. Brilliant, thank you, Nicole. And this is the last one. This one is for Siobhan. This came in to me in the chat. I'm just going to truncate it a little bit. It's asking about language assistants, and just asking, to what extent would you say language assistants are regarded as ambassadors of their culture in the school? And what role did the language assistant that you mentioned have during the lockdown? If you could just speak briefly on that for a second. It's a really nice one.
Yeah, the language assistant was actually last year, so that was during our, what we'll call normal school year. But yeah, no, definitely she was an amazing ambassador. She was from France, from Strasbourg, and she was very young as well. She was only, I think she was 19 years old, so she was able to communicate really well with them, and she knew what was kind of like fun and engaging for the class. She did an excellent tour of the school, and she brought the kids around to all the different classrooms and introducing the classrooms. As well, when she first arrived, she gave a presentation. I think this was something that they had been kind of advised to do, but it was amazing because she was able to speak to them about, say, like, for example, how schooling was different, and it was just more engaging for them, I suppose, to be able to ask questions to somebody who has, you know, come from the country. Like, you know, obviously we would explain how the schooling system is different between Ireland and France, but I suppose to hear it from somebody who's lived through it was, I suppose, yeah, just more engaging for the students, and they absolutely loved her. I suppose she was cool, she had shoes and all that kind of stuff, you know, so it was a really fun experience for them to have the French language speaker in the classroom.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So that's the end of our first session. I'm afraid we're running being very exact, 2 minutes over schedule today. So I just want to say a big thank you to Stephanie for chairing our first session so admirably. And thank you to the speakers, of course. And now I'm going to introduce our next chair, who is Marta Gerald. So Marta is going to introduce session 2.
Morning, everybody. Very happy to be here this morning. And I'm just going to introduce the second session, which is about project work. And the first speaker is Niamh Martin, and she graduated in 2009. She teaches French and German, and she's going to talk about CLIL.
Hi, my name is Niamh, and I'm a teacher of French and German. I studied for my teaching diploma in 2008, but between then and now I went a little bit off-piste as well and worked in the European Centre for Modern Languages in Austria. So today I would like to talk to you about my experiences of teaching and learning with CLIL, and what in fact this content and language integrated learning is all about. So when I first heard about CLIL while working in the ECML, to be honest, I wasn't so sure about the idea. But after seeing CLIL in action in the PPLI conference last September, my mind was swayed. So what is it all about? Simply put, in a CLIL classroom, the MFL becomes the working language to teach and learn another subject. To make it more attractive, consider this. Do you have students who love science but seem to hate French, for example? No problem. Teach them science through French and watch as they engage and learn French without problem. I'm in fact going to call my experiences CLIL Light, as while CLIL in fact is an entire approach, I only experimented with 2 lessons. I was very lucky in that the first lesson, combining science and French, was literally handed to me on a plate. A guest speaker's material made available to teachers after the PPLI conference. The second, combining home economics and French, was one I created myself as a result of the success of the first. So for this science lesson of assessing the density of fruit, I decided that it should take place in the science lab to make it more authentic. Science Week was also coming up by a stroke of good luck, so this was the time to do it, so that students would see that even in French class, we could get stuck into science. And in CLIL, while the focus is on the content, pre-learning and scaffolding of the necessary vocabulary is still important in order to, in the end, ensure discussion and communication. We had great fun in this lesson for so many reasons. It was completely different. It was hands-on. Focus was on the practical experiment and not the intricacies of the language. It was authentic communication, which brought the language to life. For the second lesson, I used the week of Pancake Tuesday to mix home economics and French culture. So it wasn't just going to be a case of making crepe in French class one day. In doing so, we looked at the vocab for ingredients and utensils, comparing the ingredients of cake and crepe, and looking at the ingredients and differences between crepe and galette for some cultural know-how. We even went a bit further and looked at the science of baking and the function of ingredients. To ensure that they would at least communicate with me in French, students had to ask me for toppings. And after several visits, one of my weaker students exclaimed, "I get it. This isn't as difficult as I thought." Et voila, mission accomplished. Students were really asked to try to communicate in French while making their crepe. Some did, some didn't, but wonderfully in their reflection, many admitted that they could have used more French. And that is what CLIL is all about, making language use authentic, creating situations that model real language use and context. In effect, it is learning by doing, where communication is the most important. So if you need help, the PPLI have a dedicated CLIL section on their website. Or if you prefer to talk things out, the PPLI communities of practice are really great to just meet up with other teachers, share your experiences and ideas, and even solve your problems. I'll provide links to the sites that I've mentioned in the Q&A session afterwards, but in the meantime, thanks for listening.
Okay, so thanks very much for this. That was great. So the next session is by Kira Rock, and she graduated in 2006. She's a teacher of French and Spanish, and she's going to talk about project work.
Hola a todos, bienvenidos to my take on an effective way to enhance your teaching and learning through project work. So I think we all know the reasons why project work is worth doing, including student buy-in, the interactive element, the can-do attitude it cultivates, collegiality at home and abroad, and how it is appropriate for all levels. Well-planned project work, for me anyway, focuses on the 4 key skills that we need. It uses all kinds of techniques, individual, peer, group work. You can incorporate as much or as little technology as you like and focus on vocabulary building, grammar, provide ops for critical thinking, make cross-curricular links. So your starting point, where are you at? If you've never done it before, which I doubt, given our new junior cycle curriculum, from first year, build from first year, develop that skill set through poster work, research project in second year, cultivate that again in third year, and they do this now through CBAs. Continue it into TY and, believe it or not, into senior cycle. It's a springboard for me for opinion or essay writing. When it comes to senior cycle, this is where I use eTwinning. Most of the time teachers will say to me, I'm not doing that, no way, I haven't time to be doing something else. So what I've done is we developed a new eTwinning project, which began a number of years ago through a contact with our classroom assistant at the time. She put us in contact with her teacher from secondary school, her English teacher, Martha, and since then we have done many, many projects. So you have to be smart, identify syllabus areas that are required for exams and base your projects around those, inviting students to take part as they go. So over time, as I've said, we started small with things like pen pals, writing to each other, discovering the region. And over time we have become much more, I suppose, professional at what we're doing. There's much more depth and complexity, especially at senior cycle, because students at that stage have had 3 or 4 years of exposure to target languages, and they have their skill set developed, and they're much better able to really have a go at this. It also provides opportunities for getting awards, both national and European awards. And in a school like mine, where languages are an option, there is therefore a lot of competition with other subject areas. So for me, this platform with awards, etc., really builds up the profile of languages in my school. So the next couple of slides just show you some of the work produced by the students, but using technology, regular poster work, artwork, and they've always are given time to reflect on what they've done, what they've enjoyed, where they've done well. Our current project is the one you see here, the 4 Ways to Change, which ran into a few hurdles this year with our shutdown, but we kept going and used part of their work in their assessment this year. This slide shows you the actual platform for eTwinning. So it's a lovely way to showcase your students' work and to track it all, and it is also safe and secure. So the benefits of project participation, both intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic for the self-esteem and well-being, and extrinsic with the acknowledgement, both in your own school and then national and European awards. Showcasing your student work pays dividends. And it really gives them pride in what they're doing. And there's also the opportunity to work with foreign colleagues through the Erasmus Plus program. So points to consider: plan on an individual level, and if you've got it lucky enough to have a dynamic MFL department, bring them along, get them involved. Why not start in-house and then move out and try eTwinning with a country in Europe. You scaffold your roadmap and invite students into the process, following what I just have on the slide here, but particularly be realistic, with the use of target language starting in first year and building up. Try and include your students in the marking process and feedback, getting them to give their take on what they've seen presented in class too, by setting specific criteria. And final thoughts: it gives creativity in your classroom, makes it a fun environment. Students want to be there, they want to complete tasks, they want to be successful. Work with them, give them the reins. It can be hard to do, but give them the reins. You'll be really surprised with what they can come up with. Try not to take too much on, and to be successful, be flexible. Let it go. If it's not running according to plan, change. I'm leaving you with 2 links. One is to the story of how we got on during lockdown and with our own project, and also the 10 steps to a successful eTwinning project. Wish you the very best of luck. Suerte.
Okay, thanks very much for this great example of eTwinning. And now I'm going to introduce the last speaker of this session is Aisling Finn, and she teaches French and Irish. She graduated in 2009, and she's going to talk about introduce languages to primary students through interactive digital communication.
Hi, my name is Aisling Finn, and I'm a language teacher at secondary school level for now over 10 years. I teach French and Irish. I'm very, very passionate and a bit obsessed about French and also about new learning technologies and integrating technology into the language learning classroom. I also am a mum of 4.
Bonjour! J'aime aller en France parce que j'aime les températures.
J'aime la France parce qu'il y a plein d'endroits magiques à visiter. Et mon préféré, c'est Paris.
It is, I suppose, because of them that I've been working on a project called Linguistics for the past 18 months. So it started 9 years ago when I was heavily pregnant with my first child. I was sitting in a standard classroom and surrounded by language teachers, talking about the hopes and dreams of my new arrival. And I announced that I had planned to raise this child bilingually, to which the whole place erupted laughing, much to my amusement, I have to say. So the reaction was very much, oh yeah, we all thought that, but no one really does it. This was a bit like putting a red flag to a bull. So I armed myself. I put French TV in so they could watch cartoons in French. I bought as much French toys, lullabies. I used to learn on them all singing the songs from when they're very young. I invested heavily in a lot of the curriculum stuff throughout the years that I could do with them. But I suppose I found that I was very much dictating of the conversation scenario. So I started looking at other ways to stimulate conversations. So I researched the French curriculum and how they introduce English into their education system. And then I started really looking at the UK system and how they introduce French, Spanish and German into primary school education. And I suppose the two outcomes that I got from this, first of all, it's very hard to have one-on-one conversation time when you have a class of so many children. And also the second issue was that the languages were being taught by non-specialist teachers. This is due to the lack of specialist teachers, which meant that it was being taught very much through translation, as the teacher wasn't confident themselves, didn't have the same passion and energy to really inspire that language learning that a language teacher would have. So they were the two issues that really stood out for me. So this is what started off and got me going into Linguistics. So Linguistics is a digital game for primary school children to learn a foreign language in a very fun and interactive way, very much based on a communicative approach. So they pick their little avatar, they progress through the game, there's different levels of different worlds, and they acquire the language in a very natural way. So there's no translation, they partake in conversations, and there's voice recognition integrated into it specifically for children in order to ensure their accuracy of pronunciation and to ensure that they're correctly engaging in the conversation.
Je m'appelle Georges. Et toi, comment tu t'appelles? Je m'appelle Brie. Bravo.
So I was very passionate about this. We started off very simply. I started off on my own with the research that I had done, and I upskilled in animation. So I created small little scenarios in order to break down the dialogue and kind of analyze how am I going to get this across. And I suppose that's where digital technology really helps us out to avoid that translation issue. It's so much more visual and engaging for children. So here's a sample.
Alors du jambon, du fromage, des tomates. Merci.
It was very important to me that there was an element of accreditation that would be linked to this. So what I'm doing is that I'm building each level so that it aligns with internationally recognised standards. The children have different challenges that they have to accomplish, and they're learning their language and using the language as they progress through the game. So COVID really kind of put a spin around things a little bit. So what we did is that myself and my children, we did online classes. We did French on Friday via YouTube. And this proved to be a huge success. We also did a virtual school tour to Paris, which received great feedback. We had thousands of views on all our videos. We've got a great following and great support. It's so important to get children at an early age open to language, inspiring them and just opening their worlds. And I suppose I'm very passionate about this. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I would be very open. If anyone has any further questions, they can contact me, no problem. If I can help you in any way, if you're interested in this area as well, feel free to contact me. I will be more than willing to be involved in anything that would promote the success of language learning in this way. I think it's key going forward. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
I suppose it's Jane now who's going to collate the questions from the chat for the three speakers. Thanks very much to the three of them.
My plan was to start with the compliments as I did in the previous one, but if you have a quick look in the chat, there are far too many for me to compile here. So bravo to everyone. These were very, very well received presentations again, so thank you so much. We're going to start with a question for Kira, or sorry, question from Kira for Niamh. And Kira asks, is it fair to say that the CLIL element is a plenary of the learning, putting it into action after the scaffolding in class? So Niamh, if you want to address this one.
Yeah, that question makes me think that it's viewed as two different parts when it's not really, and that's really important, in fact, that the language is combined with the subject, and it's the subject that is the most important, and that they learn by doing as they learn about the subject. So there's no, even though there's scaffolding to learn the vocab, that's part of the science lesson. So this science lesson was, as I said, given to us during at the end of the PPLI conference, where in fact there's a worksheet. So as we go through the science lesson, the worksheet is there to learn vocabulary, and let's see, start video there. And so that's it's learning in progress. So it's, yeah, if that answers the question.
Just one more for you, Niamh, from Stephanie O'Riordan. She wanted to know, how did your colleagues react to your intention to introduce CLIL? And do you think that you and your colleagues will further integrate this approach in your school?
Yeah, sure. I didn't actually say, oh, this is CLIL and this is what we're going to do. I suppose some of my colleagues had been at the CLIL conference, so they knew what it was about. And to my colleagues who weren't at the conference, and maybe who were involved in science, I just said, look, this was at the conference, so I'm taking it now into the classroom, and we're going to do this for Science Week. And then I told them, oh, I'm going to do something similar for Pancake Tuesday. I was going to say, yeah, I've changed schools, so I'll be using all of that again. But I know that my colleagues were very impressed, interested, and kind of their minds were sparked as to what can be done to, as someone else said, have this cross-curricular situation. And but that's what it's all about. And I'll finish there, because it's making the language a real communication tool, because that's what language is. So let's just, bring in another subject and learn that subject, and then it naturally becomes cross-curricular.
So Aisling, we're going to jump onto you, if that's all right. And so much interest and feedback in your game and your adorable children. Thank you for sharing that with us. It was a really lovely presentation, as well as the amazing technical aspect of it. So a couple of questions on the game. So Marta wanted to know if the game provides feedback.
So at the moment it gives immediate feedback, as in bravo, bien fait, well done. If you've done it right, it might say try again, or I didn't hear you correctly, if the pronunciation wasn't exact, or things like that. So there is a certain level of feedback. I suppose you can't progress through the game unless you've accomplished the tasks. So that's kind of the way. It's really to promote autonomous learning among children, that they're not dependent on a teacher, they can advance at their own pace. So I suppose it's great for differentiation when you've got such a mix of students, that you can have some students kind of progress a bit at a higher level, and other students can take their time as they go through it. So that's at the moment where we are with it.
And I love the idea of implicit positive feedback, as you know, as we would have in a natural conversation. You're not told this is correct or this is incorrect as you're doing it. But no, that's absolutely fantastic. And you said, sorry, I'll just hijack this one for a minute. You said you upskilled in animation, so you animated that.
Yeah, I'm one of these people. I try anything and kind of throw my hat at anything. And you know, if I suppose I didn't have funding. I still don't have funding, so I was doing it as much as I can on my own. And so during last Christmas, my husband helped me, and literally we just swatted up on all the Adobe Suite products on animation and just went for it. And now they're very basic, but it's just a great visual to get your point across when you're speaking to people and presenting it. And even just for me to break down the conversations into the most simplified elements and really just focus on what structures are they able to handle at that age. Get them, again, it's kind of back to what everyone's saying, get them speaking the language. From the minute they start the game, they're speaking the language.
Amazing. And just a question in using it in the classroom setting. So was it used by your students in class time or outside class time?
No, so I suppose since I've been working on this, I'm on career break from secondary school teaching. We had a school in Limerick actually ready to pilot test it. There's a teacher there who loves his technology, and all the students have their own tablets and laptops. So we were just about to do that after Easter, but unfortunately COVID kind of put that on hold. So like everything, it just put everything up into the air. But he was very interested, and I got a lot of great feedback from principals, even on the YouTube that we were doing, especially for students who were preparing to go into secondary school, that they felt they were behind in everything else because of the sudden lack of schooling.
Yeah.
This gave them a step ahead going into secondary school, that they could kind of, oh, well, I know a few French words now before I've even started French in secondary school. So it just made it a positive. And that's the way we really promoted it, as something to do like as parent and child, nice activities to do together. They were kind of 15-minute videos, and it was just make it fun and every day. I mean, we started off doing them live, which was quite stressful because you're trying to control your own kids and they can say anything in live videos. Then we kind of ran into a few issues with the quality of it, so we kind of pre-recorded it. So like that, it was a learning curve for us as well. And I suppose we've developed that further. We were contacted by Cloud Academy, and we've now put together more of a, I suppose the ones on YouTube, and just to answer someone's question, they are open to everyone, they're free. We've put together a kind of a better presented format where you can see the words coming up and you can see the structures, and it's a bit more structured in how we present it. And we've now put that together as a commercialized course, which will be on our website in 2 weeks, and also on Cloud Academy. So again, we're just kind of beginning to get it out there and just get primary school children open to languages.
Brilliant. Well, I think you've got a fair few fans already, just based on the responses in the chat. But that's the end of our prepared questions, and we've got actually 5 minutes for open questions. So I'm going to hand back to Marta. If there's any questions Marta has for the speakers, or if anyone wants to jump in, use the raise hand function, and we will we'll take your question then. So back to you there, Marta.
Yeah. So, well, I'm sure there is a lot of interest in the 3 sessions.
Well, excellent presentations, everyone. Really well done. It's just amazing to see what everybody's doing in other schools, and it just is really so inspiring. So well done to everybody. I have a question about the CLIL. So with the home economics and the introduction of French, I'm just wondering, say, like, what did you do to prepare your students for that activity? Like, did you pre-teach them the vocabulary, or yeah, what level of preparation was there before the actual event?
Yeah, so I suppose this is the thing to think about. There's not an awful lot of preparation, because the language is part of the learning and part of the classroom. So you actually learn in the classroom.
Doing it.
So I think we had by chance done some of that vocab already in another lesson, which made it easier to hold this home economics through French lesson. But that's really important to understand, that the learning of the vocabulary is an integrated part of the class itself. So like if you remember one of the slides, it said like c'est une pomme. So, you know, that's part of the class itself. And you don't need to worry about pre-teaching, because as I said, it's part of, even though the focus, so maybe this is what's causing confusion, even though the focus is on learning about the subject, you still can, it's okay to learn the vocabulary in the class itself.
I think home economics is such an excellent subject to kind of use as cross-curricular, because you learn already the vocab for la cuisine, faire la cuisine, and so on. Maybe music as well could be a good one, but I was just thinking, like, how would you do, say, a science lesson, because there's such like difficult vocabulary, so you probably wouldn't do that in a science lesson, would you?
Like, I mean, this was a pretty basic science lesson, I suppose. So, you know, it doesn't have to be everything, like be choosy and make it easy so that you can still have a cross-curricular session, and don't choose the most difficult thing out there. Or alternatively, if there is something exciting, so that you can learn the word for a microscope or fire, or to attract their attention. But yeah,
it's excellent. Well done. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just make a remark, which is interesting, because with the new PME, where we have two disciplines coming together, isn't it very much what's happening now in practice when you are doing that? And I remember our own student teacher, I'm nearly certain it was actually in Kilmallock. So if somebody did something in Kilmallock a good few years ago, we actually talked with the student, initiated that, because she was very friendly with the home economics teacher. Another case I had in my history of a school placement tutor rather, was with geography as well. So you really have a number of disciplines that go very well with languages. No, it's just a question of coming together with other teachers in the school. And did you find that, Niamh, that was really the point there as well? Or did you not bother at all having somebody else with you in the school to embark on it?
Well, I think sometimes your colleagues aren't actually available to do this. I think even though I did have a co-teacher who was a science teacher as well, I did it with second years, maybe I did it with first years as well, but she just wasn't available at the time. So I think because it was my first one, I didn't think at the time of getting as many colleagues in as possible, but definitely there are things to think about to make it real. Like having the science teacher in the classroom makes it more science. Have do it in the science lab or the woodwork, well maybe not the woodwork, but have it in the classroom to make it feel like it really is that subject.
Exactly. We have one of our presenters, and I'll leave it like that, Pa Sheehan, who did it as well during school placement. Deirdre, are you there? Do you remember he was doing PE and Irish at the time? So it was actually experimented, which is interesting. As student teachers, a lot of well, at least good few that I know of, tried things like that. So it's lovely to see that now it's happening really as a structured initiative. Thanks anyway.
So now for session 3, I am delighted to hand over to my colleague and co-host of the event, Natasha. So Natasha is going to introduce our third session.
Yes, thank you, Jane. As Jane said, I hope you all have your coffee and your tea ready as we go to session 3, which is all about optimizing online learning. As in the sessions before, we will have 3 speakers, and we start with Niamh Grealish, who graduated in 2007, and she will talk to us about fostering student voice in the online MFL classroom. So enjoy.
Hi everyone, my name is Niamh Grealish, and I just wanted to share our experience of some tools that assisted my colleagues and I in activating our students as agents in their own learning during the distance learning period. So we as a school adopted the G Suite as our main platform, and some of the main apps and some of the other features are also well worth a look. As complementary software, I would really recommend everyone have a look at Screencastify, Vockaroo and Whiteboard.fi. So they work very well with the G Suite, but not just the G Suite, it would work well with other platforms also. So Google Classroom has many functions, one of which is the question function, and because we're talking about student voice, it's that idea of maximizing engagement. To hear more voices, it gives a very easy means of I guess, maintaining student engagement and accessing input from as many students as possible, there are two styles of questions that you can choose from. This is one example linked to curriculum where the students were asked by way of revision in readiness for the end of year assessment, a simple question. The students then were able to respond, and this is how it looks here for the teacher. It also gives the option for the teacher to reply, so very good for formative assessment. Just to show up here, there's an option where students can reply to each other. A teacher can decide to turn that on or off. And the final screenshot here is to highlight how the Google question was a very good means of accessing responses from the student as to whether new ideas that I had tried, such as screencastify video overviews, whether they were well received or not. And that acted as a springboard then to allow me to kind of follow up on what did work well and fine tune it a little bit more. And you knew that the time you were putting in was well spent. Screencastify being very useful for myself as a mother of two young children at home during the lockdown. But I needed to make sure that it was also beneficial to the students and worth the time that was being put into producing those videos. Google Forms then offers a wider variety of question style, and it hooks up nicely with Google Sheets, which is an equivalent, I guess, of like an Excel spreadsheet. Blank Quiz offers short answers, paragraphs you choose depending on the topic, which style you'd like to include, and you can mix and match as well throughout the quiz. Responses can be viewed on a summary basis, or by individual question, or indeed by individual student. And that's just a final screenshot showing a populated Google Sheets spreadsheet where I've hidden the names and the email addresses of the students, but it would have auto-populated that from them getting a link sent through email or Google Classroom, and it allowed then for greater analysis to inform future planning. Google Meets is the audio-visual conferencing software, and very useful from a language perspective for both formative and summative assessment. One can easily just join a meeting, share a link with the students through, again, Classroom or email. Students have the option of joining with or without camera and mic, so they could just listen in. Highlighting here the chat function, which was very useful, particularly for students maybe not wishing to unmute and speak to the whole class, but they could have their question typed in. I could respond then for the benefit of the whole class. And there was an option for the students to present their screens, as indeed for the teacher to do so. Worked very well with the CBAs, where students had some pre-prepared presentations, for example, and there is the option to record the meeting. Okay, so again, formative and summative assessment based with the target language being easily recorded. Just to highlight Google Sites as a hub where an indexed tab can be created. You can basically build up as much or as little as you like. It can allow for insertion of text, video, multimedia, basically embedded videos and links. Pages and subpages can be created for ease of navigation. And just to highlight the interaction there with Google Forms, where I wanted to get the students' voices on board. How could I improve this resource further? And their results then obviously came through to me, generated a spreadsheet from there, and again, just informed my future planning. So I suppose the bigger picture, it's always good to get a different perspective from one's own. Who better to ask than the students? And those conversations might have taken place on a virtual basis through lockdown, but all of the apps that I've discussed with you there are very much applicable when we return back into the classroom, with the ultimate, I guess, advantage being encouraging greater collaboration on all different levels, teacher to student, student to student, teacher to teacher, with the aim of enhancing the student experience. And I just wanted to leave you with a couple of web links there for future perusal. So c'est ça, merci.
Thank you, Niamh. We will go to our second presentation of session 3. which comes from Samantha Brown, and she will be talking to us about designing assessment for learning in the MFL classroom.
Hi everyone, my name is Samantha Brown. I'm a former student of UL, graduated 2 years ago now, and I studied German and Spanish through the Professional Masters of Education. Today I'll be talking about designing assessment for learning in the MFL classroom, so with a focus on Spanish as that's my subject. So firstly, our learning intentions, just a little in-joke there. We'll reflect on formative versus summative assessment in an Irish post-primary MFL context. So what does it look like really in the classroom? We're bridging the gap between assessment for learning at junior cert and at senior level, and employing formative assessment strategies within a summative focused system. So, formative versus summative. So there's a nice analogy here that summative assessment is when the guest tastes the soup, but formative is when the chef tastes the soup. So the chef being more personally involved there. But in general, summative, as we all know, is more of a letter or a number grade. So A, B, C, 100%, 50%. And formative would tend to give the learner more direction in their learning. There's a lot of other criteria which it has to meet, but that's the broad version that we'll go with today. So, within an Irish context, the state exams, especially the Leaving Cert, is our main form of summative assessment. And we see, especially from COVID and the whole situation with predicted grades, just the obsession that this country has with this exam. People often say that they have nightmares where they wake up that they are taking a physics exam and they've forgotten a calculator or something. It's very, very important to us as Irish people. It's also illustrated how ineffective the system has proven to be, with many people suggesting that continuous assessment could be an alternative. Yet what motivates us as teachers to try and enable our students to achieve within this system is that it is linked to higher education, and that this point system exists. It's very competitive and we want our students to get the courses that they want. So within this system that's so focused on summative assessment, how do we implement the formative assessment that's being sold to us, that we're being told, okay, at junior cycle there's this focus on formative, but eventually what's really important is you have to get them their points for college. So here we see our typical junior cert student getting an average. She's a merit grade, so the old C if you're not familiar with the new system. And our question is, how do I motivate this student in assessment for her learning from junior cycle into senior cycle? And what I would suggest is that through novelty, when we're designing our assessment, through novelty, through effective feedback, and through allowing the learner to experience success, we can create effective assessment for her learning. And I'll go through these in a bit more detail now. So novelty. We all know that kids respond very well to anything that's new or novel, anything that breaks the norm. So the key is not to abandon these strategies when you get into senior cycles. So just because they're being assessed on different topics doesn't mean that we can't assess them in our everyday classes in the same way, in this, fun way. We have this tendency to think of exams and fun assessment as this dichotomy, but it's very possible. For example, there's a question on synonyms that comes up on the Spanish Leaving Cert paper every year, worth a lot of marks, that could be assessed very effectively through Kahoot. So it's about varying our assessment strategies. Feedback. So Hattie found that feedback has been proven to be the single most effective and significant factor in increasing students' motivation. So basically giving the students information on where they are now, how can they bridge the gap, and where are they going. So it gives them more information about where they can go in their learning. So an example of this that I've done would be student-teacher meetings. So this can take the form of a parent-teacher meeting where you encourage the student to come along as well. Or in my school, I was fortunate enough to have a language assistant this year. So I was able to take my 6th-year students out individually and give them very detailed feedback. They took notes, and we found it to be very effective, that level of one-on-one feedback. And I know that's not that's not possible in a lot of situations and contexts, but I found it to be personally very effective. And the last thing I would say is to allow students to experience success in some way or another. So here is a screenshot of what I found when I searched for happy student. When I was making this presentation, as we all do, we go into Google Images and we search for animated, black and white, whatever it is, and I wanted a happy student. And you can see here that there's not one, not two, there's actually 6 instances where happy yielded results where the student was holding an A. So what that means is that we need to kind of challenge their idea of, okay, I'm not just experiencing success if I get an A. We need to find alternative ways to allow them to experience success. So something that I've done personally, and I know was done in college as well, was medals and missions. So you could give them maybe 2 missions, things that they could improve on, and then 1 medal. So again, they're experiencing success in some way, and it's formative because it's moving them on. So maybe the last time they didn't use a heading on their work, or they didn't give the correct date, but the next time they do, and you're praising them for that, you're praising the work. So who makes this happen then? Who is in charge of this? So you could wait for the State Exams Commission to, make a fairer paper. You could wait for the NCCA to redesign the curriculum, or just acknowledge that it's us as teachers to work with the curriculum we have. So just because there is a focus on this summative exam, it doesn't mean that our everyday learner experiences can't be more formative, and that we can't find ways to give feedback and make assessment more motivating for our students. So the main thing is not to forget that assessment is actually twice in the stage of the teaching and learning cycle. So any staff meeting we have, it's always divided into teaching and learning, and then, okay, now let's talk about assessment, as if they're 2 separate things, but they're really, really not. Teaching and learning does not exist without assessment. So we shouldn't view it as something so separate. Okay, I teach, they learn, we revise, and then there's this summative assessment at the end. It's very integrated, and it's about making that motivating for them. So thank you very much for listening to the presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it. Congratulations as well on very successful many years of teaching language education in UL. Bye.
So thanks to Samantha, and our next and last speaker of the session is Shane Ryan. He graduated in 2017 and will talk to us about fostering learning in an online language classroom with the alteration and development of new and existing resources. So in the light of COVID, this could also be very, very useful for a lot of us.
Good morning. So my presentation is going to be under the following title: Fostering Learning in an Online Language Classroom with the Alteration and Development of New and Existing Resources. So the language that I am going to be speaking about today is Gaeilge. So online and remote teaching, I suppose, for myself, it was something new. It was a bit of a challenge, and I spoke to other colleagues about it as well. They did feel it was a bit of a challenge also. It was something we all had to adapt to very quickly from the 12th of March when schools closed. A key area of concern for me in particular was I felt that student engagement and progression may be hindered. And I felt that progression of language learning and language acquisition might be a bit of an issue, because I suppose each teacher is the same, I suppose, across all subjects. The student-teacher interaction is very important in order to improve learning, as well as pupil and pupil interaction. I mean, pupils learn by interacting with one another there, and by sharing knowledge and by creating knowledge and sharing knowledge and transmitting that knowledge back. So I felt they would be the obstacles that we would face online and remote teaching. So I suppose really, what are the resources I used? Because that's the theme I've chosen as part of my online teaching. Well, I suppose PowerPoint was something I always used in school as kind of a guiding tool, a guiding mechanism to help with learning, to guide the class. But I felt it was very important to use it here online, because as a visual aid, I felt it really helped me as a teacher, move from topic to topic. And I think students were able to see that quite clearly as well when everything was posted on PowerPoint and sent to them. So yes, it was good for starting new content and obviously for going over old content. And it was something I was extremely familiar with and I had a great knowledge of, and I felt it had great importance. But with that, I suppose Office 365, the platform we had used inside the school, was very, very beneficial. It really kind of, the tools within Office 365 itself were very, they were very, very easy to use once you got your head around them. The technology behind it was absolutely phenomenal. For example, if I were to do an online lesson, I was able to record it. So when I was doing online lessons, I was able to actually record those under the class groups. So for example, if certain students were unable to log on at a certain time, so if we had a lesson at 11 to 12, for example, a couple of students had messaged me at the time saying they weren't actually able to come at that time. Maybe, for example, that somebody else at home was using the computer at that time, but they'd go back and rewatch the videos if they were there. So I suppose it really allowed students to go back and see the interaction of the class as well, the other students asking me questions, etc. So it was really kind of good and engaging. And I felt it really kind of improved and kind of developed autonomous learning and self-evaluation of student content, which was extremely important. With that, a platform on Office 365, I know a lot of people use Google Classrooms as well, which is very good, but I feel Office 365 does have more, I suppose it has more of a variety of technology behind it. I was able to kind of set quizzes and multiple choice questions for students to test their knowledge of a new topic. So I suppose the resources I had that I may have had on paper in my own classroom, in my own files, I was able just to, I suppose, put them online, but create them as part of a quiz, which was quite fun. So students would be able to use their smartphone, they'd be able to log on and check any new homework, and they'd be able to do the quiz and submit it as part of their classwork or homework, depending on the lesson. And I suppose I'd like to thank my own deputy principal of my school for actually, giving us the knowledge to, I suppose, develop our Office 365 skills with the many YouTube clips that were sent on a daily basis to kind of help with the transition to online and remote teaching. Another thing that I didn't really use that well, and I kind of got very familiar with over during remote teaching, was the use of Quizlet. I felt it was a very valuable resource, and when I started using it, I suppose I kind of learned from another teacher, a language teacher, that certain students love it in particular because of the flashcard element and things like that. And being able to test yourself with vocabulary all the time. And I think it really did work well in my Gaeilge class when I introduced it, because certain students came to me and said, "Sir, I love this. It's really good. It really helps my learning. I find I'm learning more vocabulary." And I felt that's something now that I'm going to take back into the classroom and use a lot more when we get back into the classroom. So thank you very much again. I hope you got a bit of insight into what it was like for me to teach online with the kind of the existing resources I had knowledge of and used, as well as my learning, and how I transitioned as well into online teaching. So thank you very much.
And thanks also to Shane. Now we're going to our Q&A part of the session. And could I just ask that if you have no technical issues and if you feel comfortable to turn on your camera, because it's just way nicer if we can see people here. It's also nicer for the people who are presenting. With this session, we have actually just one speaker present to take your questions, and that is from the first presentation. That's Neve. Neve is here to join us. Unfortunately, Samantha and Shane couldn't make it today, but we are very happy that Neve is here. Neve, can you give us a little shout out?
Hi, Natasha, how are
Hi.
you?
Perfect. I will just hand over to Jane so we can do the chat questions first, and then we come back and see if there are any other questions in the room. Jane.
So, Neve, all the pressure is on you for the first couple of minutes, but you're going to handle it admirably. So I have actually 3 questions for you. The first one is from Stephanie Reardon, and Stephanie asks, were you trained by your school to use these tools, or did you have to learn by yourself? And could you tell us a bit more about screencasting in terms of difficulty?
Okay, so a combination, I guess. As a school, they would have invested, the G Suite would have been the platform that was chosen. I know when we're a new school, so we're only coming into our 4th year, and we would have come with various backgrounds of Microsoft and G Suite, but once this was the platform that was decided, we would have had some whole staff training, but then we would have had a coordinator in the school who would share a lot of links with us. And I guess the biggest thing there, and I was following the chat down, there is that trial and error and that kind of, overcoming a fear. Okay, it might go wrong, but we'd be very open with the students. And I know in my class, I'm saying, right, guys, you're the guinea pigs now today. We're going to try this. And it's a case of learning together. And even with Google Classroom, just to take one example, we were looking at it at one point from the perspective of formative feedback. So, for example, Niamh did a presentation, she shared it, and Jane was able to comment, and Therese was able to comment, and so on. But for some reason, I had forgotten to untick a box. It was as simple as that, but the kids were able to kind of say, Miss, have you opened this? And it was that kind of collaborative learning over and back. So we had that as, I guess, a benefit prior to commencing remote learning, but there were new elements that I would have had to kind of research and played around with a little bit on the ground, so to speak, or in the virtual classroom, so to speak. So I hope now, did I answer your question there enough?
Absolutely. I think that's probably very familiar to everybody here in terms of how much we think we know about something versus how much we actually have to mess around with it. And what the students know about it as well can really help us kind of develop our own skills. Yeah. Perfect.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the Screencastify there. So there's a 5-minute cap on those videos, generally speaking, with the free version. But during the lockdown, the company unlocked it. So I was able to generate videos, be it 15, 20, 30 minutes for free. That's something that I would definitely, even with the 5-minute cap, take back with me into the classroom, because it was, I guess, look, I work really closely with the student council in our school, and it's really important for me that that comes not just from weekly meetings, but it's in the classroom with the students, in every classroom, in every subject. And we did kind of say, look, what aspects can we bring? We formulated a survey that was sent to all the students across the school. And one thing that they did like was, obviously the Google Meets engagement, because you had the face and you had the reassurance of the voice, but also with the Screencastify, you had that lovely ability to pause and rewind the teacher. And it came up a lot where I might have had a resource prepared and I did a voiceover to kind of break down grammar points, or perhaps, to model pronunciation, but they were able to actually pause it and go back. And I just feel, obviously, I think we'll all be happy, to be honest, to get back to the classroom. I'm waiting for my 2 to burst in on me at any minute now here. And so from that perspective, there were challenges that we had to face, but Screencastify was great because I could do it at night time when they were going to bed without interruption. And then kind of, I suppose that's something I can do when I go back with shorter topics, be it introducing a new topic or just giving a little set of instructions and so on. So yeah, definitely worth a look, and very easy to use.
I think that's a huge consideration. It could have excellent functionality, but if it's difficult to get into, it's maybe not worth the time.
No, definitely very easy.
So I'll just take one more actually before I hand it back to Natasha to open the floor. So this one is from Jean Conher, and Jean wants to know, to what extent do you think students engaged differently with feedback given through online quizzes than in the normal classroom? Normal classroom.
I guess one thing that I would have observed was maybe a confidence. They're not maybe as afraid, to try, be it they were submitting vocaloos or they were, recording themselves on their phone. It all depended on the individual child and what capacity and functionality they had online at home. And I was very open to them saying, if you can't do it this way, let's look at alternatives, because they had enough pressure on them, and we didn't know how many kids were in a house with so many devices, and it was all just getting them to do the best they could. But there was a very high level of engagement. Now, obviously, there would be 1 or 2 you might have had to chase up a little bit with and see, well, what is the issue and how can we sort it? But with regards to the feedback, and I don't know is it kind of a reflection on their culture, or their being so au fait with technology and having the phone in hand, that there was very swift responses. If I was putting a comment on to a document, they would have received a notification which came through to them straight away. And it actually gave me a hop on occasion, because I might have been correcting again late at night and thinking, oh dear Lord, what's going on here now? They're writing back to me. I don't want them coming up now. We don't want complaints now that we're contacting the kids so late. But it was very instantaneous, and they were very free with their questions. So I guess the positive around it was, if you had that maybe in a classroom, you'd put something on a book or a copy or an A4 page or whatever, and it's gone back, and then it gets lost or it's at the bottom of the bag. But this was kind of, I suppose, generating a sort of an online conversation, and there was over and backness, and you would often then get, one of the earlier presenters mentioned the thank you, and it meant a lot to think, well, yeah, okay, that did help that child, so excellent, we'll keep going with that chain. So I hope,
I think it's something
to the question.
No, absolutely. It's something really worthwhile to remember as well, is we perhaps a lot of our students might feel more comfortable engaging digitally than they, with shyness issues or anything like that. It would actually be more beneficial for a certain sector of our classroom. That maybe that's something to consider if we could bring it forward post whatever post-COVID is.
Absolutely. And just I don't want to take over there, but the Vockeroo briefly as well. It's very very, very user friendly. You literally type in Vockeroo onto your search bar and it brings it up, so that the kids, most of our students would have been used to that already from using them with maybe Chromebook devices in school, but it was something they could play, and they'd re-listen and they're saying, oh no, that's not it, and they could rewind and redo it. It was very accessible to them to kind of play around and listen back to their own pronunciation. Correct. Exactly. Yeah. So definitely something that will be able to go hand in hand with the normal classroom again, as you say.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I'm going to hand back to Natasha now. So as previously, if you have a question, if you want to pop into the participants, click on your own name, and you should have a raise hand option. So Natasha will be keeping an eye on that, and she will invite you to ask your question. If anyone has a question, we've got a few minutes.
If the raising hand function doesn't work or anything like that, just give us a shout out. That would be fine as well. We're all very disciplined today here. So we just give it a few seconds to see if anything comes up. And maybe in the meantime, Niamh, I know you have a lot of questions and you're only go-to person for this session. But did you find it difficult for the students also? Did you have to spend a lot of time explaining the technical side of things to them, or was it all like, oh yeah, no, sure, it's so intuitive, it's so easy, we have no problem with that?
I think we were really lucky with our first and second years that they follow a short course in digital media literacy, so there would have been a familiarity there. And with our third years, which were our oldest group at the time, they wouldn't have had the digital media exposure from the start, but because they were our only year group, they would have got it kind of by default, because they would have been able to access the computer room that bit more. So there was, I think we were very lucky, there was, an awareness of how to get their way around Google Classroom. Now, there were certain areas that they needed guidance with, and, even down to email etiquette was one thing that jumped to mind, and we kind of took it on as an SPHE and created a PowerPoint with a voiceover, a kind of a general guide, if you like, and a reminder of the efforts and the constraints and the challenges that teachers were working under, and they responded very well to it, and we could see that it was being played out in the recent, I suppose, email communications that we got. But yeah, I saw something there in the comment that definitely, that notion of being digitally literate and kind of just being able to function on a Snapchat or whatever forum that they would like to interact with regularly. So it was maybe trying to merge those two worlds in a way that enabled them to get the most out of their teachers and to make sure that the communication was viable, I suppose. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Our time's up there. Oh, Grania has raised her hand. Just real quick.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to say thank you to Niamh. Niamh and I were the same year, actually.
Hi,
So,
Grania. I didn't recognise you there now, indeed.
We're a Google school also. So one of the issues that we had was that, like yourself, I have 2 young children. So we were advised to give feedback between 9 and 11 in the morning and between 3 and 4 in the afternoon. And that's not possible for an awful lot of teachers in the situation that we were in. So like yourself, I was doing the same thing, trying to keep 40 tabs open and then pressing enter in the morning if I didn't one hand swiping at the computer. So that's what we were doing. Now I have sent the way you can send a suggestion to Google.
Very good.
You can send a suggestion to Google to say, could you introduce this feature? So I would just suggest that it would be a help to you, it would be a help to me and to many other teachers if they had delayed feedback that, like, you can schedule it now. But if feedback could be scheduled for us also, then that would be great. So the more people that ask for it, the better it's going to be.
Yeah, no, it's a great idea.
I agree with so much of what you said. We also use Screencastify. I used to use Buckaroo, haven't used it in ages, so this is great. So we get back to that again. You know the way when you
reminders, absolutely, yeah.
It's not embedded if I'm not using it. So this is great. I really enjoyed that, Niamh. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. With no further ado, I pass on to Angela, who's sharing session 4, and we will get started right away. Angela, please.
Right, so good morning, everybody. It's lovely to see so many of you here today, and well done to our presenters on the really high quality of the presentations, which are so informative and practically based. So very well done. So I'm delighted to be introducing the presentations relating to the 4th theme today, which is supporting effective learning. So our first presenter is Livia Healy. Livia graduated in 2005 and is teaching in the Limerick area.
Hello, my name is Livia Healy. I teach French, Spanish and EAL in Colashton and O'Neill, a girls' school located in the heart of Limerick City. It has a very vibrant, multicultural EAL cohort of students, and they enrich so much our school culture and community. In the last few years of my career, I have taken a great interest in the EAL program, in supporting the learning and the teaching in my school. And given the fact that EAL provision in Ireland is quite abysmal, actually, there are still a lot of wonderful things happening all around Ireland. And I would like to take this opportunity to actually highlight the need of approaching a whole school approach when it comes to teaching EAL students. And if there is one whole school approach to be embraced by schools, it should be the introduction and the maintenance of home languages. It has tremendous benefits, not only for linguistic development, but also for the development of personal identities and cultural identities in our students and in ourselves as well. We all benefit from this. I'm not going to tell you more about it because I'm sure you probably know all the theory, but I will let one of my students who has taken part in the competition for organized by Mother Tongues, and her name is Kaja Bozi, a third-year student from Slovenia, who only about 2 years ago, or a bit more than 2 years ago, came to Ireland. And her poem will really tell you why exactly languages, home languages, are important. So I will have to read it because she's back home and for the summer, and I wasn't able to get a hold of her. Kaja, I hope I'll make you proud. Being Slovenian by Kaja Bozi. Mom, with košilo, calls me to eat. With sweet nočko, she puts me to sleep. My friends greet me zdravo whenever we meet. I would sing songs in Slovenian, walking down the street. When shocked, Kaj is what I say. I still silently add prosim after I may. I still count in Slovenian, old habits stay. It's weird because I used to never delay. To laugh, speak, smile and play. I write poems to make my mind clear. It's been Slovenian for too long. Some of it will disappear. I will make so memories, I'd like to keep them all near. And so I've now written a line for every year. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the rest of the presentation.
And her wonderful students. Okay, so our second presentation is by Pa Sheehan. Now, Pa graduated in 2016 and he's currently working in the Canadian secondary school context.
You're all very welcome to the presentation. I've been living in the US and Canada for the last 3 years, so I'm kind of fascinated by this topic, and I'm going to tell it in the form of a story. So we have Siobhan. Siobhan may look Irish here and has an Irish name, but she actually grew up in Spokane, Washington, about 5 hours east of Seattle. Lovely little part in the middle of the, kind of near the Rocky Mountains. All 4 of her grandparents were born in Ireland. Both her parents born in the States, but all 4 of her grandparents born in Ireland. She visits Ireland every summer on her holidays. She goes to Mass every Sunday. She's even a member of the local Irish dancing group. However, she knows she's Irish, but she doesn't really feel it. And the reason she doesn't feel it is because all she hears is English. Everywhere she goes, English, English, English. And she's a bit confused by this. That's why you can see she's so upset in this picture. So she starts doing a bit of research into her family history. She realizes her grandparents spoke only Irish. She realizes they feel robbed of her family's language, in the sense that her grandparents either decided to not teach their kids Irish, or her parents decided to stop speaking Irish. As a result, she feels robbed and she wants the language back. At the same time, she's not burdened by the shame of incapability that many Irish people feel in terms of not being able to speak Irish. She never got the opportunity, therefore she doesn't feel shame. All she feels is a hunger to learn. She really wants to learn the language. How is she going to learn it, however? She's 4,000 miles from Ireland. She's in a city with no classes or speakers that she knows of, at least, enter technology. So she's going to use technology to help her learn the language. And she goes to her very first thing that most language learners in the modern world go to, is the free app that is Duolingo. It's free, it's easily accessible. Visualization is fantastic for new learners to see things that they've never seen before. For audio, it's fantastic, dealing with sounds that we might take for granted being Irish ourselves, that BH is pronounced like a V, or that DH can be pronounced like a Y or a G, things like that. Duolingo really helps her out with that type of thing. It's also context focused. She doesn't have to get too bogged down on grammar as such. Duolingo tries to avoid that as much as possible. And it gives her the basic foundation that makes her happy, as we can see in this picture, that she now has a bit of Irish and feels more Irish in the sense, and feels more happy in herself about that. However, she's very self-motivated as it is. She's already quite self-motivated. Duolingo is fantastic if you're not that motivated in terms of giving you prizes and awards and email updates. She doesn't necessarily need, she wants to learn the Irish language for a particular reason. She doesn't need to be self-motivated. She doesn't need to be more motivated, should I say. She also feels a bit isolated. She's learning every day, but it's on her own and it's not as authentic, and she really yearns for authentic communication. That leads her to her next step in using technology to help her learn Irish, in which she goes on to letslearnirish.com, fantastic website started by a man called Ronan O'Donnell in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago. Now it's very popular. She tries the free intro session and it's fantastic, and she realizes straight away this is exactly what she needs for authentic communication. There's also different levels of ability, so she doesn't feel like that she's too out of her comfort zone, but at the same time she can challenge herself. There's open conversations. She can really focus on listening and speaking all the time, which she couldn't really do as such in an authentic manner with Duolingo. There's also discussion forums to focus on her reading and her writing skills. Again, more authentic in comparison to Duolingo. So she can focus on all 4 language skills in an authentic manner, and that's what she really strives for. There's also structured courses with expert teachers. She's not too bothered with this at the moment, but at the same time she can really get into it if she really feels like doing so. Hundreds of members on this website, if not thousands in the future. And these are all potential friends, and friends are the gateway to language learning. If you can make a friend through a language, you're on the right track to being a successful language learner and user. However, now with these new friends, she wants to move away from the website, and now she's looking at voice notes, something that we take for granted, particularly millennials. We're so busy nowadays, we use voice notes, or maybe we like to convince ourselves we're so busy nowadays, but voice notes, fantastic for language learning. Accessible anywhere at any time. She's on a train here, as you can see. She can log in. She doesn't have to be there when the course is ready to go. It's whenever she wants. Time to listen to what the other person is saying, repeat it if she so chooses. That pause time that might be necessary for a new language learner. Time to practice and prepare what she's going to send on herself and make sure it's correct, even model her pronunciation on what she just listened to. And time to reflect back and listen to how she's improved as time has gone on. Mainly focusing on speaking and listening. It's a fantastic language learning tool in a group or in a one-on-one situation. Again, very authentic in the grand scheme of things, and you're using language in a real way. But she wants to even take that a step further. Now she's looking at video calls. Again, something that we might just look at as a method of communication, but to a language learner, a massive tool into opening up different elements of language learning. You get that immediate response that you don't get with voice notes. You know, she must interpret straight away what the other person is saying and put together her response in a much more shortened pause time now, which is fantastic for language learning. She also gets the benefit of facial expressions and body language, which all of us as language learners know extremely crucial and help a lot of learners out in terms of understanding. Mainly focusing on speaking and listening, again, which is exactly what she wants. And it's as authentic as it gets in terms of using technology. You know, she's 4,000 miles away from home, but as we can see, she's still very happy here. She's using Irish in an authentic manner with a person she met on Let's Learn Irish, or one of the expert teachers who she now talks to on a regular basis. In terms of being more academic, if she wants to work on her grammar, maybe go away from speaking and listening, there are groups on Facebook, Irish Learners Book Club, in which they translate books to Irish. There's a room for discussion, which is very authentic in a sense. There's more academic, or it is more academic, and there's more reading and writing involved, which is something she may have neglected in the past, but now something that she can really focus on. It's also a platform to make more friends, which is where she wants her authentic communication to come from. Not just in a classroom-based setting, but talking about real-life stuff. So as we can see, Siobhan has gone from an unhappy person who knew she was Irish but didn't really feel it, to now where she's using the language in an authentic manner, and she hasn't left Spokane, Washington, and she could essentially be a fluent Irish speaker, and all that's helped her out is the use of modern technology, stuff that we take for granted, but which can be fantastic tools for the modern language learner.
Thank you very much to Pa. That was a fascinating account of the learning of Irish in the Canadian context. We're going to move on now to our third presentation, which is by Liam Printer, and Liam is teaching in Switzerland. So we're very much seeing, great internationalization, I suppose, in practice here. So I'll hand over now to Liam.
Hi everyone, my name is Liam Printer and I graduated with the Diploma in Education with French and Spanish in 2013. So today I wanted to talk a bit about why teaching with storytelling is so motivating. So to begin, I think you can all appreciate, and I think we've all been there when we've tried to plan something and we've put all our effort into it and it just fell flat and it just didn't work, even though we thought it was going to be the best activity ever. But I'm sure we've also had some successes when students did a really amazing piece of work, or when they handed something in that just blew you away, or did an oral exam, for example, that was just extraordinary, really exceptional, and went above all your expectations. So we've been there for both. And for me, the gap between those two things is motivation. But what is it, and how do we actually do it in the classroom? So in the research, motivation is considered the most important thing when it comes to the learning of languages, as well as many other learning outcomes in all other subjects. But we don't know or appreciate or work out exactly why that is in many cases, or how to do it. So I'm doing a doctorate of education at the moment, just writing up my thesis now, nearly there. And I concentrated on the motivational pull of teaching languages with storytelling. So what I used was this SDT, which is self-determination theory. And this is from Ryan and Deci in 2000. And essentially it's about building intrinsic motivation. So often when we think about motivation, we think about extrinsic things like rewards or punishment or trying to get some goals. But actually, intrinsic motivation is really results in higher learning outcomes, and it's more important than the extrinsic stuff. And it's when you pursue something out of pure enjoyment, interest, and joy. And in order to do that, so if you think about something you really love, it probably hits these three basic psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So autonomy is when we're thinking about doing something that is within our interests, and when we have an element of choice involved, and when we can control some of the outcome and we have ownership. Competence is when we feel like we can do it, we have a perception that we're able to do it. And relatedness is when we feel a kind of relationship to other people who do that, or to a group, or to the subject content itself. So for me, for example, snowboarding is a big passion of mine, and it would hit all of these for me. So my study looked at teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling, which is called TPRS. It uses the comprehensible input approach of giving lots of understanding inputs to learners, understandable inputs to learners. So autonomy. In my study, it was a longitudinal study in my thesis over a whole year with a French teacher. And I actually did a study, a very similar pilot study on this previously, and it was published in the Language Learning Journal. So if you want a copy, just email me and I'll send it to you. So teaching this way with stories, you ask the story rather than tell it. And so there's lots of autonomy. It's a co-creation of the story with your students. They come up with the words for the characters, the details, where they're going, but you have the kind of skeleton script of where it's going. They have a lot of ownership because they feel like they create it with you. And you as a teacher, you have a lot of freedom. So for autonomy, big tick. Then competence. So how do we grow that with the story? So when the teacher selects and accepts their idea into the story, they feel very competent, like they're able to do it. Students also show that they're able to recall and use the structures from your story, like he went, she went, she forgot, he did, she put, all these things. They can recall that. And they're able to retell it with a huge amount of detail. And also they understand 100% of it because it's a story and you go slowly, they follow along with it. And all of this means they have high levels of perceived competence. And finally, relatedness. They feel like they create really strong bonds to the characters because they came up with them. And they use words like everyone and everybody throughout the research. The teacher's personality comes out a lot in this, and the students feel like they grew a kind of a connection to the teacher. And they always call it our story because they built it together. So if you'd like to hear a bit more about this, please check out, I do a weekly podcast called The Motivated Classroom. Episode 4 has just come out, so it's still pretty new. Get in touch with me here on the email or on Twitter on any of these, Liam Printer. And if you want more resources about TPRS or about motivation and the studies that I've done in it, just let me know. I hope I can make it for some questions and answers today, but I've got a workshop in my school, so I'm not sure. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much to all our presenters there, and Liam has just joined us, and Pa and Livia are here as well. So my job has been made very easy in this session because we only had one question and the rest was just overflowing with praise and compliments and positive comments. Pat, my question for you is from Jean Conacher, and she says, great presentation. How do you think stories of heritage language learners abroad might help motivate learners of Irish in Ireland? If you want to address that one.
Yeah, it's a very fair point. I think I spend a lot of time here explaining to other Irish people what my job is, and that, 95% of my students are Canadians, and, some of them have no even heritage with Ireland at all. Like, some of them are just are motivated to learn because of, they like language learning, or they find it interesting, or they're fascinated by Ireland, and they don't necessarily have to be Irish in terms of their family or anything. But yeah, it's a very fair point. Like, if you could, nearly everyone I meet here, a lot of Irish people here in their 20s and 30s, and they're a lot of them try to get back into Irish here, and a lot of them are very, once they join the public classes that we often have only once a week, you can see them being very more encouraged to learn, working in groups with Canadians who have probably developed a better fluency or a better they're just better at Irish at the moment than they are. And a lot of them feel, it's almost like I often compare to people here who haven't played hurling in 20 years, and then they meet a Canadian who's playing hurling or playing Gaelic football. It's the same thing. Like, if they kind of realize, Jesus, maybe this is something I want to do and I can do. It's a skill that you are able to do, and so a lot of them do become more motivated as a result, because they can see that it is something that they can do. It's not something that you can just write off and say, oh geez, I was no good at that at school, I wasn't able to do it, or it wasn't for me. They can see that it's totally a doable thing because they've seen adults do it. So yeah, 100% definitely does motivate other Irish people.
And just maybe changing perceptions around Irish from possibly what we've been ingrained with. People in their 30s maybe would have had a different experience of learning Irish to people now, just to kind of reshape that perception. It's absolutely fantastic. Thanks a million, Pat. So I'm going to hand back to Angela now. So same as before, if you have a question, if you want to just stick your hand up in the raise hand function in participants, click on your name and there should be an option there. And then I will unmute you if you're not already unmuted. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for questions, I'll just hand back to Angela if Angela has any comments she wants to make while we're waiting.
Well, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much. And it's fantastic that Pa and Liam were actually able to join us for the question and answers from Canada and from Switzerland. I'm going to just start off with a question for Livia while we're waiting for the other questions to come in. So Livia's working in the Limerick context. So Livia, you talked about some of the challenges that are being experienced by the EAL learners in your school. Could you give us a little bit more detail?
Wow, where do I start? Well, it's been a journey, to be honest. I have to kind of refer back to my own experience as an EAL, former EAL student myself. Some of you know that I'm originally from Romania, and I went to United States at the age of 15 for 1 year, and I have been in the silent phase. I've been the quiet kid at the back, and I've experienced all these, emotions, that come with, shall we say, I don't know, cultural bereavement factor. And our EAL students, they're the ones that have the greatest needs, especially those who have no English coming to the country. They could be 12, they could be 5, they could be, but when they come to secondary school in 5th year or 6th year even, you really don't know what to do. So basically, there's many problems at many levels. Students are expected to adapt, but at the same time, teachers are not expected to adapt. The education system, our education system, is not an adaptive education system, in my opinion. After 15 years of teaching, is definitely one of the reflections that, I strongly believe in. And combine this with some statistics, and you'll kind of understand why I actually hinted at how abysmal the AL provision in our country is. Statistics basically, just to quote, for example, recent research from NUI Galway, a study on diversity gap in the teachers in primary school, carried out by Dr. Elaine Keane and Dr. Manuela Heinz. 99% of the future teachers were white Irish settled. Now, another thing, a survey recently carried out by practitioners, basically teachers as practitioners, on voluntary basis, highlighted that about 75% of teachers who have completed the survey out of the 450 respondents have never received absolutely any training related to EAL students.
Sorry
And
to stop there, you've raised a number of very important issues, and I think it would be a very good idea that we revisit some of them and give you time to actually expand a bit more during the roundtable discussion with Dr. Jean Conacher and with Dr. Deirdre Lynchy a little bit later on, because they are very important areas and it's a good forum to address some of them. So I'm going to hand over now to Natasha. Natasha is going to moderate some of the questions that are coming in for Liam or for Pa.
Yes, so we had in the chat, we had one question for Liam, and I will just read it out so that everyone has it. So the question is, how long would it take you to complete a full story? Also, would this activity be suitable for all language abilities, and what size group would you recommend to work on in a single story? So Liam, the floor is yours.
Hello, Limerick. How's it going? It's this is really nice to hear such diversity coming through, which is really nice, and people in different countries. I'm sorry I couldn't be here earlier. We're doing a big anti-discrimination, anti-racism workshop in our school today, so I'm just out for lunch right now. So what size group for a story and when to do it? So first of all is that the stories work with all groups and all ages. I teach with these stories from beginner right through to advanced. Typically, I would do the storytelling, or what we would call it is story asking, because you get a lot of their input in it. So that's where you get that autonomy from. You typically works better, I feel, with like beginners, so maybe level 1, level 2, level 3, but I use it with here we call them like year 12s or year 13s, would be the equivalent of 5th and 6th year, when you're introducing difficult grammatical concepts that sometimes take them a while to get their head around. So in Spanish, the subjunctive, for example, we will tell a story all about, this woman who wants her son to be, the son who wants her mum to be a famous ballerina, but she doesn't want to, and he wants her to go there. That's all subjunctive in Spanish. And so we tell the story in that way. It makes the students feel like they're doing something different. It's not always the same. They feel like the class is a bit different, but they're learning the context of how you use subjunctive, for example. We use it loads with beginners, like really a lot. Somebody, I think you asked as well, Siobhan, what group size would you recommend to work on a single story and how long would it take? So group size, honestly, anything. I presented at the Association of Spanish Teachers conference last year in Ireland, and there was maybe 300 people in the room and we did a story, and everyone was involved in it. I've done it with groups as small as 6. I've done it with, I feel like it works best with anything from 12 to 25 or 30. How long would it take? So in the research and in the stuff about TPRS, teaching proficiency with reading and storytelling, they say the best stories kind of never end. They come back, the characters resurface months later. But typically, I would tell one story per unit. Each unit is about 6 weeks. So I tell one story every about 6 weeks, and the story lasts typically anywhere from a week to 2 weeks of lessons, roughly. Now, it really depends what you're talking about, because the actual telling of the narrative of the story may only be a couple hours. But all the questioning, the reading, the putting it into little role plays, the doing the activities with it, that can go on and on and on, and developing new characters and stuff. So it's honestly this has completely changed my practice. TPRS completely changed my practice. And I feel like my relationships are so much better with the students. The research I've just done for my doctorate, the teacher who did it, the French teacher, she says in the research there was the before the story and the after the story about just how dramatically different her class was. So if I've not sold it enough, check it out. Get onto the Motivated Classroom podcast. I'm telling you, I honestly feel like, tell your colleagues, tell people about it, because it has massively changed the way I teach and my job satisfaction.
Thank you very much for that, Liam. Very, very interesting to hear about your experiences and the way you're describing the methods you use. So I'm going to hand back now to Jane.
If anyone has a question for Pa, because I think Pa just had the one at the beginning.
Okay.
Or if Angela has any questions for Pa or Liam, or question from Liam. Liam wants to know, has anyone ever tried any comprehensible input teaching methods?
Yeah, so I just wanted to throw that out there just to see, because I certainly feel like the comprehensible input teaching methodologies are something that I came to a little bit after I had qualified as a teacher. I started to read about it more, and it is quite popular in America. And I think that's why it's gradually infiltrating into European style of teaching now. So I just wanted to know, does anyone ever use anything, or have you read anything about comprehensible input teaching methods, or would you try anything else like that out?
Thinking of the comprehensible input, like especially I see, well, it has tremendous relevance, like for all languages, for teaching of all languages, like, and especially for EAL students, you know, that all the teachers should actually, you know, engage with, especially with the students in the silent phase, you know, and give them a lot of comprehensible input. Although they may not get any response back, there's so much going on, and they're assimilating all these kind of structures and vocabulary. It's actually, it cannot be underestimated.
That's a very interesting point you're making there, Livia. I'm just going to go back now to Pa, to give Pa, if anybody has any questions for Pa. I'm going to ask you, Pa, to tell us a little bit more about the teaching of Irish as a minority language. And I think it's in Toronto you are. You talked about the experiences in terms of like a case study of the one student. So how many students do you teach Irish to in the school you're in? How does it, can you just tell us a little bit more about the context?
Yeah, I'm at the university here at the moment teaching, so I'm not in secondary school. As far as I know, it's not taught in the high school system here, but at the university in Toronto, you'd have about, on average, 15 in the beginner's class, and the intermediate class then would be less, like it'd be around 10. But the public classes tend to draw, like I was actually living in Newfoundland last year, St. John's, Newfoundland, and I would have had about 40 students in the public classes, all beginners mostly. And then I've taught a couple of kind of online classes. We'll say usually they used to be immersion weekends, they're called, and they take part all over North America. And I've been about 4 or 5 of those. And we had one recently, which would have been in Ottawa, but it was online. And I had the advanced class, which said you're looking at about 15 completely fluent speakers. So I'd say in my experience in North America, I've met, you know, well over 100 different people learning Irish at beginners, intermediate or advanced. I've been a couple of those Facebook groups that I would have referenced earlier on, where you're working with, you know, people extremely fluent basically in the language, and then people just starting off on their journey. But it's amazing. Like the vast majority of them have Irish ancestry, and they love Irish culture, and they feel you know, they almost feel obliged to learn it, you know, in a sense. And they've made friends then in North America through that as well, and they all engage online. They have their immersion weekends where they meet up, and it's almost like their hobby, you know. It's like I compare it to people who kind of run marathons, like they travel all over the world running marathons. Like these people travel all over North America just learning Irish at different weekends and things like that. So that's the kind of the dynamic you're dealing with, and it's from all age groups as well. Like you're you know, looking at people in university age, say between 18 and 24, and then, you know, all the way up to people who are retired, and this is what they do in their spare time.
It's really good to hear that Irish, you know, it is very much a vibrant language there, and is that a trend then that you're seeing, that there's a growth in interest where you are?
Yeah, I would. Like, Toronto obviously is a big city, so you're going to have like, I would say it's a trend. Like, it's a relatively small circuit at the same time. Like, everyone kind of knows everybody, but yeah, it definitely is a trend. But you kind of meet people from unusual places. Like, Joe, there's always at these immersion weekends, a lot of these people tend to know each other. They've attended a lot of the weekends, but then you'll always have a random person who's kind of travelled on their own from the middle of New Mexico or somewhere, you know, or wherever, and they mightn't even have Irish ancestry. They just this is their thing now. They decided to learn Irish, and they love coming to these weekends or to take these courses and things like that. So
so they're really motivated, aren't they? Bringing us back to Liam, the intrinsic motivation there. So Jane, you have another question, I think, for Liam. Is that right?
Yeah, there's just one more question for Liam, and then I think we're going to have to end this session before we go into our round tables. So the question for Liam, hang on, I've lost it. Liam, I think if you wouldn't mind helping me out here, you read the question. I know you saw it in the box. If you wouldn't mind going ahead. Thank you.
I've got it, no problem at all. You've got a million things to deal with there. It's like there's so many things been going around here. So, yeah, geez, Pat, it's really interesting to listen to that, and it's brilliant. Like, I mean, as an Irish person living abroad like yourself, I think it's just fantastic to hear that Irish is still vibrant and trying to grow it. It's brilliant. The question was about, is there somewhere we can get the scripts or we can get the stories anywhere? So basically, Catherine, if you go on Instagram and you look up the Motivated Classroom, I posted during lockdown, I actually wrote like my own kind of mini emoji story in Spanish. And there's like 30 different chapters of that. There was one for every day. So basically, I just did a little story, a 1 minute story with a 1 minute voiceover, full of emojis for it to make it really comprehensible. And I posted all of those on my Instagram on the Motivated Classroom. But if you look up, there's a guy called Jim Tripp, and I've just put it in here, Tripp Scripts, kind of hard to say. He's got loads of scripts online, and you can download them. They're all in English, and then you can translate them into the language that you're teaching. And they're usually quite simple. And then there's another one called the Comprehensible Classroom. Now, I think quite a few of hers are in Spanish, but she also translates them in English. I think the difference, Tripp Scripts, I think it's something like $10, and you get like loads of these scripts. But if you just Google TPRS basic scripts, and you'll find loads of these stories. But I would definitely recommend checking out on YouTube, like TPRS storytelling, and reading about it a bit and listen to the podcast. And I think you'll really start to get a feel for how it works, and then just have a go at it, because I think that's probably the best way to go about it.
That's great. Thank you very much, Liam. And again, it's great that both Pa and Liam were able to join us from Switzerland and from Canada today. So I'm going to say thank you very much to our three presenters in our fourth session, and hand back to Jane.
Thanks a million, Angela, and thank you to our our four chairs altogether, who did an absolutely fantastic job of managing the sessions. So I see actually our overall host, Marie-Therese, has her hand up. Marie-Therese, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll have about two. No problem. I'll just mention it for a few minutes. I just want to congratulate Liam, especially, and Pa, for two reasons. Is the fact that you are relating your work so much to research that has been done. So 2 points I want to make. First of all, I realize you're in Toronto, and Swain and Lapkin was there before you. You see what I mean? About all to do with how to relate with the ancestors, or rather the grandmother and grandfather. Have you done some research with them, even though they are retired? Have you been in touch with them?
Have I been in touch with who? Sorry, Mary-T?
Swain and Lapkin, who were actually in Toronto. They did a fair amount of research to see how to maintain heritage languages. They were very, very big in the 80s. They came to Ireland a fair amount.
Okay, anyway, no, I haven't. No. I haven't worked on them, but
well, look into that. But the one thing that you are doing now, which is interesting, it's what is happening in Europe, and I'd say in Germany. Jean can come back on that, but definitely in Spain. When I was in Leon, they were doing it, which is to bring students from Erasmus, so they're Erasmus students, and they come together. Well, in that case, in Spain, it was on a Monday night. I know that in Dublin it's done as well. So people who want to, for example, speak French, they gather in Dublin. So I'm just wondering, listening to you, that's what you are doing basically through Irish. Same principle.
Yeah, Yeah, it's the exact same. Like in normal times, it would be our kind of the weekly classes. There's a lot of conversation circles and things like that. Where
exactly.
People...
So often it's a pub club here. Joking.
Exactly.
Dublin.
Yes. Yeah. It's the exact same.
And to go to the teachers around us today, maybe that's an idea that we could have to open that to secondary schools. Now, may not be in a pub. Sorry about that. But what I'm trying to say is something we always see for third level. But what stops us from doing it for second school children? Because I see, for example, a good few au pairs here in Killaloe. That's where I am now. You know, we have a good few Spanish au pair. We could actually gather people and do that for secondary school. You know, those who are 16, 17, 18. It's an idea. And to go back to Liam, interesting what you said about comprehensible input with Krashen. If you follow Krashen on Twitter, because he was the man who introduced it, he is now very interested in reading. And he's putting all his energy in reading.
Yeah, that's the really interesting part, is that, you know, Stephen Krashen's input hypothesis is now firmly based on that the input we can get is very much around reading. And I think that's why it's called teaching proficiency with reading and storytelling. And so the first step is show. So you're showing through gestures the structures you need in the story. The second step is tell, which is you're asking the story and getting the input from the students. And the third step is read. And so you're reading various different kind of versions of the story, like a long, a short, a medium, and then ones with different characters, but the structures are the same. But the reading is a fundamental part. And I don't know if you can see what's behind me here. But that's in my classroom. These are all the little Spanish readers that I've just ordered for my free voluntary reading library, which is a big part of what we do in terms of the input of trying to give free voluntary reading at least once a week for about 15 minutes of just silent reading, even for total beginners. After about a week or 2 weeks in, they'll start to try and read those really basic books.
Interesting. Plenty more to say again.
Absolutely.
Merci. Super. Thanks, Pa and Liam. And Livia.
Hello, Marity.
I would say if that's okay with everyone, or Marite, was there something else? Because otherwise we would go to our roundtable discussions and to our first roundtable, which is chaired by Jean. Jean, it's all yours.
I think Catherine was going to come in first.
I'll introduce the session, the Q&A roundtable. So thank you everybody for very lively and inspiring presentations and Q&A sessions. So we are now moving to our last part of our event already, which is the roundtable discussion. You would have noticed that the roundtable discussions will be broke down into two pieces. So the first part will be chaired by Jean and the second part by Deirdre. Just a few words about the roundtable discussion. The format is going to be slightly different as the discussion will be live, not pre-recorded. Once again, everybody will get a chance to participate. This time, because the chairs will be busy chairing the discussion, they won't necessarily be able to read all the comments. So you will be able to raise your hands and ask questions. So please use the participant, find your name, and raise your hand to be able to get your questions across. Once each members of the panel has participated and talked. So we're going to move straight away to our first part of the roundtable discussion. As Natasha has said, it is shared by Jean. So for many of you, Jean's face will be familiar, but just a quick reminder, Jean is a senior lecturer in German and has been involved in the language education programs from its outset. As coordinator of the Common Language Pedagogy modules, she has a particular interest in the challenges of putting language policy and pedagogy into practice into the classroom. She's a school placement tutor for German, and is very involved also in supporting language students in the transition, the very important transition between secondary school and university. So without further ado, Jean, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kathleen, and thanks for that very kind introduction. So I'm delighted to introduce our three panelists for this discussion of the importance of links between universities such as UL and schools. And so I'm just going to briefly introduce them and then leave as much of the floor as possible to them. So first of all, Anne Grills is a qualified teacher of French and English with experience in Ireland, France and Japan. She's a past president of the French Teachers Association in Dublin, and she was seconded to the Professional Development Service for Teachers as an MFL and literacy advisor, organising the National MFL Alive conference in 2017 and 2018. She's been a PME tutor in Maynooth for the last 3 years and is now Deputy Principal in Malahide Educate Together Secondary School, which is a new school in North County, Dublin. Our second participant is Kathleen Hand-Niclot, and following an established career in Paris with the insurance industry, she returned to Ireland where she discovered a love for teaching French. Since graduating from UL's then professional diploma in education in French and ESL in 2012, Kathy has been happily working as a French teacher in the Crescent Comprehensive here in Limerick. And 2 years ago, she set up the highly successful Limerick MFL Community of Practice. Finally, I'm particularly happy to welcome Catherine McAuliffe, a Spanish and history teacher at Step Aside Educate Together, who has worked as a regional project leader to the Modern Languages in Primary Schools initiative. So we have all three sectors. She continues to support language teachers in her roles as a PME supervisor and occasional lecturer in the School of Education at UCD in the area of language methodology. And today she'll focus primarily on her experience as a post-primary language initiative associate, a role in which she enjoys developing local MFL communities of practice. So without further ado, I'd like to start by asking the panelists how you would interpret our session title, the importance of forging links between universities and schools. What links are important to foster through teacher education programmes and why? And what can we as language teachers and lecturers most learn from one another? And perhaps, Anne, I could start with you. If you unmute yourself. Can you unmute?
Hi everybody, apologies it's a bit echoey here. They've started digging outside and I had to move to a very remote classroom, so it may be a little echoey. So yeah, I think the relationships, when I was thinking about what sort of links, there's kind of three areas I suppose that occurred to me immediately. One is in the initial teacher education, and as in my role now as deputy, it's very interesting to see PME students coming into our new schools. So I think that link is vital, and I think there's huge scope for development there, particularly around the role of the cooperating teacher. I would love to see them more integrated into the system of initial teacher education. But also, I think around my role in PDST, I was very aware of the support of the universities around continual CPD for teachers. I mean, UL, Maynooth, UCD, all the universities were always so helpful in contributing to workshops, to national conferences, and to forge that link, because I think certainly my own experience for a teacher, and I do still teach French, by the way, I keep myself on the timetable. But one of the things always struck me was that I was conscious, and I think a lot of teachers are, that the research may be going way beyond what I learned in my initial teacher education. So I think that link is vital to keep teachers informed of the latest research, and also to kind of have the universities and the PME programs maybe aware of the different contexts of school. I mean, my own school is a new model of education, for example, and I'm conscious sometimes of tutoring my own PME students that some are in DESH schools, some are in private, so some are in voluntary, ETBs, all of that. So I think creating an awareness for the universities of the very different contexts teachers can be in, and also the schools being aware and keeping in touch so that we can have this shared vision of education and that the teachers in school can reflect. I'll leave it there for a minute. Sorry.
Kathy, can I maybe bring you in? Yeah.
For me, the link is already there. We're talking about forging links. For me, it's already there. I'm lucky enough to be able to live it personally and perpetuate it naturally. I suppose first inside school and then outside school. So when I was doing it, it was called Professional Diploma in Education, and a school placement was in Kilmallock, and my cooperating teacher there had already done what was the Graduate Diploma in Education. So already I had that link there. Then now I'm in Crescent College Comprehensive in Limerick, and regularly we host teachers who are on placement from UL. So I'm continuing the link in that way. That's inside school. And then outside school, with the setting up of the community of practice with PPLI, there are numerous UL graduates there, and we're also lucky enough to have regular UL presence. Marie-Thérèse Batardière is often present there to give us some support, which is absolutely fantastic. So for me, I'm lucky. Continue the link, and it's fabulous. I also continue to work with the cooperating teacher I had initially on my placement, and it's fantastic. It's great to see that mix of theory and the practice, the in-classroom practice, and trying to keep up to date on both is fantastic.
Okay, and Catherine?
Hi everybody. Well, I think I'm just going to be reiterating what Anne and Kathy have just mentioned. I suppose the example of today's excellent morning, like I'm completely motivated and raring to go back into the classroom just from what you've organised this morning between the university and past pupils and excellent educators. So I suppose it's a matter of getting these types of events out there. So I'd be very interested in what you're going to create, for example, in the next week, of the videos that you're going to, I suppose, send out into social media and so forth, a bit like Liam and his podcast is trying to make sure that that audience are, like, I personally think my professional development has completely moved online to social media, and making sure, maybe what Anne said, is that the universities and the schools, they've so much to offer, but from quite different perspectives. So it's just making sure it's going to be so beneficial for everybody involved, and essentially the student in front of them in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. I'm quite struck by how much you feel that you're gaining by these kind of local initiatives, and particularly through the MFL communities of practice. And I wonder if you think, is there a role to play, to be played by national initiatives, things like Languages Connect and so on, or are they so far away from the actual practice in the classrooms that that local approach is stronger and potentially more successful? Maybe Kathy could start this time.
Yeah, I think historically, when Languages Connect, the first time I heard about it, it was, I think it was around December 2017. And that was at the same time as we had the introduction of the new junior cycle and that. And I feel that if it hadn't happened at the same time, we were so focused on new junior cycle, CBAs, etc., that it kind of got a little bit lost in translation. And that's a pity. However, during one of our sessions in the community of practice, we did have somebody, Greg, I forget his second name, who came representing Languages Connect, and it was fabulous because as a result of that, I know in our school anyway, we signed up. We got like a plastic envelope. I know how to say it in French, l'étui. I forget how to say it in English, but with 30 whiteboards. Lovely whiteboards and the markers, and that we can use, we're all using in the classroom pre-COVID. Absolutely fantastic. So I think a direct connection, when someone actually comes to, say, that community practice model like that, where we can actually engage directly and see someone, put a face to them and realize, oh my God, all of these resources are there for us. It's much easier than just receiving an email to say Languages Connect is there, guys there, community. When we have this, and the same with UL, to have faces, to have the links, to be able to reinforce those links because we have them, we have opportunities to meet them. I think that's very, very important. So I think more of that would be great, as opposed to just receiving emails and that, but actually creating opportunities to meet and to learn more about Languages Connect would be ideal.
And Anne, maybe you're nodding there, so.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. But I think there is a role for both national initiatives, like I think you mentioned Languages Connect there. And I think organisations like the PPLI and JCT, PTSD are very good at getting down to the local ground as well and starting teach meets and things like that. And I think they have that nice combination. So I do think there is a role for both there. As Kathy was saying, it's nice to see faces. And yet I'm always very conscious of how busy teachers are, and sometimes those one-off big events where those organisations are represented is really, really useful for people. And something like this, obviously, too, which is excellent and really useful that people can access from home.
Yeah, we were talking about the advantage of actually being able to bring people from everywhere without them having to leave their sitting rooms. So
it's wonderful.
It's a good side maybe of the lockdown and so on. Catherine, anything to add as well on that dimension?
Well, I suppose just working as a PPLI associate, like they're very focused on ensuring that there's an associate nearly in 1 or 2 per county in the bigger counties, and getting out to the community of practices, which I know Kathy has set up down in Limerick. And at the community of practice, it's such an opportunity for example, representatives from universities to attend. They're very open for the PME graduates. That's one of the things we try to do at the practice meetings, is to ensure that every voice is heard. And they're great. And just sort of referring back to what was mentioned before, the CLIL course, they're excellent as well. They give webinars, and I suppose the more localized it is, it will get out there into the ether and spread from county to county, so that people will realise that these initiatives exist.
Yeah, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to suggest to Jane that we open up to the floor. I think we have about 5 minutes left. I have questions anyway, so but Jane, if you want to check if there are any questions. I don't know if Jane's there, if she's...
So far, I monitored the chat a little bit. So far, I don't think there was any in particular.
Okay.
Well, I had a frozen issue there for a second. Yeah, Natasha's right. No questions in the chat as far as we can see. But actually, Katrine Janot has her hand up for a question. If we want to go to Katrine.
Yep. I just have a question for the panel members. On a very ad hoc basis, I sometimes intervene in secondary schools, so whether presenting programs or trying to promote languages. Is it something that would be useful to kind of develop more? Would an intervention from universities, whether they are members of the staff or even students? I know there's a very successful program, I think it's in Wales, where they have students, ambassadors from higher education going to secondary schools, or even now with technology, we could have them just, intervene in school without being physically there. Is it something that could be potentially interesting?
If I could just maybe speak in my role as a school deputy, absolutely. Yeah, I can't see any school that wouldn't welcome an initiative like that. I know last year we do a lot of work around project-based learning, and we were trying to integrate languages. It was easier to maybe for some of the other subjects, and that is an opportunity where I would have loved to say to a local university, if you have any PME students or lecturers who'd like to come in, observe or help out, because our timetable is very flexible on those days, it would have been a wonderful opportunity. But any of the other things you mentioned too, CPD, you're coming in, absolutely. I think it'd be wonderful. And I think it's good for the students to see people from universities coming in. It brings it closer, it makes it real for them.
Yeah, and then they're closer in age group, and sometimes have a more role model type position that we can't really have. It's different if I go in the secondary school and say, oh look, languages are brilliant, Whereas if they hear it from students who have only a few years difference from them, you know, I think it has maybe a more powerful voice.
Yeah, I agree.
I think we have one last question, if I understand rightly, from Jane, and that's from Niamh O'Sullivan, who had her hand up. I think so. Niamh, if you want to put your video and mic on and ask your question.
Can you hear me, Jane?
Yeah, can indeed. Yes. Yeah. Hello.
So for everyone who doesn't know me, my name is Niamh O'Sullivan and I'm the School Placement Coordinator with the University. So my role is in sourcing the school placements for the students to go out and actually learn from all of you. And I'm just wondering what ways can there be for the university to connect with teachers and with deputies and principals in terms of broadening our base of schools that would be interested in taking students for placement? Is there anything that we could do to do better with you?
Could I just
sure,
mention, Jean, I know that last year, because I'm based up around Dublin, that some of the universities offered, for example, they brought guest speakers in and they offered lectures and I suppose training days, CPD events for cooperating teachers. As a kind of, I suppose, a thank you, but also like a buy-in to get more schools and perhaps teachers on board, and I suppose to forge links, to make more direct links with the schools. Because a lot of cooperating teachers, they're very busy, they don't get to meet the tutors and supervisors when they're out to the schools. And I thought that was an excellent idea. Like, I benefited greatly from attending some of those events. And also it was a great opportunity to network with other teachers from different schools, and it was really enjoyable.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. Yeah, because I think we do a lot for the tutors and so on, and it is a challenge going out and making those connections with the cooperating teachers and so on. I've got one eye on the clock here, my very ancient.
Just Jean, one port of call could be the community of practice as sort of an entrance for the universities to initiate, I suppose, school-university partnerships, because in the community of practice you've got teachers, you know, who have been teaching for a long time. You've got newly qualified teachers, student teachers. So there's a whole, I know in our own community of practice we've nearly 60, if not over that, currently in our community of practice. That alone can lead out to so, you know, you're touching base with so many schools and that. So that would be maybe a first port of call, might be an idea.
Excellent. Yeah, I can see a number of people coming in on the chat thing asking how do they get involved in COPs. So you might take the opportunity of putting a contact into the chat. And
yes, absolutely.
Anyone involved in COPs, please feel free to use that facility. In the meantime, I'm sorry, it's been so short and we had loads of things that we wanted to explore further, but we'll have plenty of opportunities in the future. I'd just like to thank Anne, Kathy and Catherine very much again, and I know you've participated in much of the morning as well, so that's very much appreciated, and look forward to chatting on later into the future. I'd like to now pass back to Kathleen, if I can, who I think is going to introduce the next part of the roundtable. So thanks very much indeed, everybody.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jean, and to our panelists. It was a very interesting discussion, and I think we could nearly keep on going forever, but we can't because we have our last session to go to. So the last part of the roundtable discussion will be shared by Deirdre Linguistics, and Deirdre is a graduate of UL in PE and Guelga, so it's quite interesting because we were talking about this CLIL in a way, so that's you have the right background there, Deirdre. And Deirdre is, so brace yourself because I'm bracing myself to pronounce it, Stjórhór, is that correct? Yes, I've practiced with my son a lot last night. So it's Stjórhór na Guelga at the university. She has led the Irish strand of the PME and coordinated language pedagogy modules since 2011. So Deirdre, the floor is yours for your panel.
Thanks very much, Catherine.
I'm delighted to chair this final part of our panel session, and I'm hoping that our three participants are online. We have Dr. Anne-Marie Young. I don't see Anne-Marie just yet. Anne-Marie is the Academic Director of School Placement in the School of Education at the University. And we have Sylviane Strapp. And again, I'm not sure, Sylviane was having some problems connecting.
It's coming in right now.
Great, great. And we have Luke O'D, who's a current UL student. Maybe just to introduce Anne-Marie, first of all, she's the Academic Director of School Placement. She has previous experience as a PE teacher, so she's a PE background also, and much experience as a cooperating teacher and a school placement tutor. And her research interests include finding a sustainable model of supervision for student teachers by engaging and supporting cooperating teachers in particular. Sylviane, delighted to see that Sylviane has joined us as well. Sylviane is a newly qualified teacher. She's a very recent graduate, a graduate since 2019, and she's a teacher of Irish, and she also is qualified in ESL. She worked at a Desh school in County Meath last year and will be moving to the CBS in Clonmel in the coming week, I imagine. And I see Anne-Marie there as Gary. You're welcome, Anne-Marie. And Luke is a student of German and Spanish, and he has had one school placement at this stage. So we're delighted to get a range of perspectives from three people who are at very different parts of their careers. And the title of the session is Ways to Support Cooperating Teachers, Newly Qualified Teachers and Student Teachers. And if I could ask each of you, first of all, maybe to give us just a brief account of your own experiences of support, or maybe lack of support for practitioners from your own perspectives. So I might ask you maybe to mute your mics, and I'll ask Anne-Marie maybe to address that first of all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Deirdre, and thanks, Megan, for inviting me today. It's been really interesting. Like everything, I'm going to find it difficult to separate the two questions because, like school placement, it's just complex. And I might touch on some of the things that came up in the previous roundtable as well from Kathy and Catherine and Anne. I guess, first of all, I just want to acknowledge, the experience that school place can be, and in the right environment, it can be, a life-changing experience. But in the wrong environment, obviously, it can also force a student teacher out of that career path. But I must acknowledge the work done by cooperating teachers in schools. It's phenomenal, and given that they don't have dedicated time to help our student teachers, and even I think it was Catherine said she's still in touch, with her own cooperating teacher, and they're the stories we hear all the time. But I guess what my role is, part of my remit, is supporting the student teacher, the cooperating teacher, and the university tutor to make it a successful experience for all the stakeholders, and acknowledge the fact that it's a two-way learning experience for the cooperating teacher and the student teacher. I guess we're hampered by the fact in Ireland, we're the last European country to actually run a system where we don't have a formalised system of partnerships, that schools still accept our students on an ad hoc basis or goodwill. And that means our students really don't get any equity of experience. And that's what we have to work on, developing school-university partnerships. So what we're looking at is that the approach is that one size doesn't fit all schools and all cooperating teachers. So we have to work on the basis that it's a case-by-case situation. So we try to prepare our student teachers going on placement that the relationship is really important between the student teacher and the cooperating teacher. And that will really determine the quality of their experience, on placement. I guess we've done a number of things and put in a number of measures to develop that partnership. So I don't know whether you want me to go through that now or wait, and you maybe want to touch in with Sylviane and Luke.
We might just move on to Sylviane and come back to that, Anne-Marie. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Much. So Sylviane.
Hi everyone. So I guess it being my first year out and being an NQT, it's so different to your kind of short-term school placements, and where you have a cooperating teacher who's in charge of that class. They're yours kind of from the minute you go out. And I guess I found it kind of overwhelming the first few weeks. Management were really good in my school. They were very approachable. But I did find that my actual own department, my Irish department, was underqualified, in that only one other teacher and myself were qualified Irish teachers, and that one other teacher wasn't really interested in, maybe not trying to support me, but trying to be there, kind of, I guess. So I found a lot of this stuff was coming back on me, that I was doing maybe a lot of stuff that I shouldn't have been doing, or that I didn't necessarily have the expertise to be doing. So from planning or whatever else. I was also a cooperating teacher this year for a PME student. So I guess, you know, in September, when I was new myself, I didn't know the students myself, I didn't know the school myself, but I was trying to, you know, grasp at other experiences I'd had with cooperating teachers and how they did it well, and trying to find myself as well. So it was tricky, but I guess it can be done. But then you hear stories from other schools how, you know, you might have a brilliant department or a brilliant PST, but we didn't have Drogheda at the start of this year due to new management. So they only came in January, and I had completed the induction workshops. But then I have to go back and do Drogheda now. But it was kind of tricky in that I didn't necessarily know them teachers that well, because they hadn't started the year with me. I kind of just started it myself and figured things out as I went along, which, I mean, that works too, I hope. But yeah, so I guess I hit the ground running that way. I think I hit everything, did I? Yeah, I guess that's what I have for that first bit.
That's great. Thanks very much, Sylvia-Anne. And Luke, would you like to comment as well?
I would. Thank you, Deirdre, and hi, everybody. So as Deirdre said, I just finished my first placement. Unfortunately, it was cut very short because of COVID, but even the first 3 weeks that I had in the school was a really interesting experience. I felt very ready going into the placement, you know, from the university side, from the first semester in the PME program. And I think I had a very supportive relationship with my cooperative teacher. I know that experience can vary greatly, but I was very lucky in how much my school kind of took me in. And I was very happy with the approach that he took with me. He gave me the space to kind of experiment with things that I'd always wanted to try out. He didn't impose anything on me. He gave me a lot of freedom to kind of play around with ideas. And I found that probably to be the most useful part of the experience. It's a very intimidating experience going into a school. You're the new teacher, and you know, some teachers maybe aren't as eager to support you, but I also think that there's an onus on each individual student teacher to try and settle into kind of the new environment of their school. So I think it's, you know, unhelpful to just look at it in terms of what the cooperating teacher or the school can do for the student, but what can the student do as well to kind of facilitate that harmonious kind of relationship.
Thanks
but that
very
was
much, Luke. I'm going to cut in there if I can, Luke. Thank you very much. We just have one more question to address, and really, I suppose, if we are to get some sense of ways to support, we do need to have a clear understanding of some of the challenges relating to the creation of these support structures and measures. What do you think these current challenges are, and how might we address then these challenges? Could I ask you to comment first of all again, Anne-Marie, there, please?
Yeah, sure, no problem. I think the biggest challenge is the lack of a national structure. I think all the different HEIs are attempting different things, different times, and there's slight confusion as well because we're actually sending students to the same schools. So as a cooperating teacher, it can be very confusing. And it's about getting the information to the cooperating teachers. So from a University of Limerick point of view, we've developed a cooperating teacher handbook that we send to all principals. So So we don't know whether that's filtering through to the cooperating teachers. And what that does is it details, the stage of learning our students are at, and gives information on observation and feedback and guidelines and everything that we do with student teacher. And we also offer every school CPD, and I know it was mentioned in the last round table. And I know Anne has asked there about research on the cooperating teachers, and what we've done a lot of research on the role of the cooperating teacher and how to improve that and give them the confidence to be a cooperating teacher. And the handbook is one of that. Training is another way. We encourage our university tutors to ask cooperating teachers to stay in the observations. And what I found is cooperating teachers at the end are going, when we've compared notes, is that actually we're seeing the same things. We know we are saying the same things, but it's given the cooperating teachers the confidence to be able to give that feedback to the student teachers. And one of the biggest challenges is cooperating teachers don't know what their role is. They don't know whether students want them there to watch them, or we need official guidelines on it, but we also need to facilitate cooperating teachers to do that. And time is the biggest issue. And what we should be looking at is a cyclical approach where student teachers observe, they team teach, and then they teach directly. Sometimes we don't see that. We see students thrown in, straight away. But what we're seeing today is really positive stories because we're the ones engaged in this and we want to make things better. But it's that lack of a national approach and the confusion that there is in schools is really detrimental to school placement. So I think as much as we can do from a University of Limerick point of view, we need consistency. But again, we have a number of things in place from our perspective to help student teachers and cooperating teachers. So it's getting that message out there.
Great, thanks. That's a very strong point, Anne-Marie. Sylviane, you have the perspective of a cooperating teacher now. So what have you gained from that experience in terms of insights around challenges?
Yeah, so I suppose it was kind of almost, dare I say, the blind leading the blind. But because I had just done placements, maybe that was a benefit, and I was able to kind of impart, okay, this works in this class. I've known them 3 weeks, but it has worked relatively well. As well as that, I knew that it was important for me to stay in the room, whereas a lot of the other cooperating teachers took it as time off. But I was too nervous as an NQT to not know, and maybe that's something over the years with more experience I'll loosen the reins a bit on that. But at the time, I felt I need to be here to know what's going on to be able to help best. So if there is an issue or if a topic isn't going in, that we can revisit it. I guess it is time though. It's tough trying to give them good feedback that'll help them, but also then preparing for your other 21 hours that you have and your leaving cert classes and everything else. So it's tricky finding that time, and it's you really knowing from the kind of perspective of a student teacher how vital that feedback is and how helpful it can be. And when a teacher is so on board with your ideas and everything, it's really good for your confidence. I wanted to be that person, but in my own head I was kind of thinking, oh God, I have so many other things right now that I don't know, can I dedicate as much time as I want to this person? So yeah, it was tricky, but I think it was beneficial in the long run, I hope.
Thank you very much, Sylviane. And Luke?
So Anne-Marie said my first point, which was that I got the impression that my cooperating teacher didn't really know what was expected of him or how he was supposed to be supporting me. And it was a very spontaneous experience where he would feed off what I would tell him. There was no real structure to our relationship, which I definitely noticed. And the second thing I would say in terms of, probably the biggest challenge I faced was a lack of willingness to let me observe classes. I found that a lot of teachers were quite resistant to the idea of me as a new teacher coming in and just plopping down in the back of the room and watching. And I found that very unfortunate because I got a lot out of the observations that I had to do, the initial two, as part of preparation for placement. So I think if teachers would be more open to the idea of being observed, not critically, but purely so that the student teacher can gain those invaluable insights into how to teach. And in that particular school context, I think that would be very helpful as well.
Thank you. Very worthwhile comments. I might hand over to Jane. Jane, I'm not sure if there are any questions or hands up with questions.
We haven't had any hands up so far, and actually the chat is being very, again, doing my job for me. The people in the chat are just responding to each other most of the time. So there's nothing that I can report at this second, but we do have a little bit of time if anyone wants to stick their hand up and ask a question live, as it were. Please feel free. Nothing at the moment.
Would any of the panelists like to add anything further? I suppose it has been my pleasure to have been school placement supervisor for Sylviane, and I know particularly that she embraced every opportunity to be involved in any of the CPD initiatives that were going on in the schools, and obviously the cooperating teachers played a big role in nurturing that interest and the confidence in a student to actually participate with members of staff. Anne-Marie or Luke, would you like to make any further comment on nurturing that sense of confidence, particularly in that school placement setting, which then lends itself obviously to a confidence as newly qualified teachers?
Yeah, like if I can come in there, I think it's really important, because that that breakdown in communication, or the cooperating teacher not understanding their role is really important. And like Luke said, you're kind of left in the dark a little bit. And sometimes it's too much for the student teacher to have it all on their shoulders. So it's trying to get that message out that we do have the support available for cooperating teachers. We've done whole school CPD on the role of the cooperating teachers. That's been really successful. And we have a number of school university partnerships that are really active. I guess our difficulty is we work with over 200 students, our schools a semester, and it's ever changeable. But I guess we work a lot with the students to develop that confidence to ask for help. But it's getting rid of that closed door policy that we seem to have a lot in Ireland, and that open door teaching is really hard, and it's a changing culture. It definitely is. We're seeing a lot more observations, but it's given the confidence, and we're always looking at ways to how to improve that, and it comes down to the partnerships with schools. And this semester is going to make it so much harder.
Thanks very much. I see that. Did you want to come in, Sylvia?
Yeah, just one thing that Anne-Marie touched on there. I found anyway that as a student teacher, it was a lot easier to ask for help or ask questions, because you kind of had that little label, and it was a lot easier. Whereas this year, I felt, okay, you have to kind of prove yourself now. Like you're on your full-time contract. You're in charge of all these years. You're a class tutor, I felt that I had to prove myself more. So maybe I wasn't asking for help. I was coming with solutions rather than problems, like maybe a variety of solutions that I'd come up with. So I think maybe that's something, I don't know if that's relevant or not, but that's kind of what I feel anyway.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Sylviane. I see that Siobhan has had her hand up, and Marie-Tay. I haven't been able to keep up with the chat, so maybe we'll just take 2 questions time-wise. We're conscious that we are meant to be wrapping up shortly. So Siobhan, if you have a question, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, hi Anne-Marie, so lovely to see you again. I was just thinking as you were talking there, say with the DRIHID programme, say like that there would be teachers trained in I don't know what the term is, so they would be, say, like a meeting point for newly qualified teachers. So if a newly qualified teacher had, say, like a person who they know that they could go to if they had a question, I'm just wondering, like, could we set up something like that with cooperating teachers? But somebody kind of touched on it, so I lowered my hand. I don't know if that's something we could maybe explore with, because I just think this was just such an amazing event, and it's just such a pity that some of my classmates couldn't be here. And I just know that they would just be very willing to take part, because like Sylviane was saying, there can be a lot of kind of negative experiences in school placement that could be very easily avoided, I think, if there was one contact person who knew that, say, like all student teachers knew, okay, this is going to be your kind of liaison person, or just contact point.
Totally, we had that.
Sorry, Siobhan, I think, yeah, that's becoming a lot more common now across schools, that they have mentor teachers who are responsible for student teachers and induction processes for student teachers. So it is becoming more and more. The link between the DRIHID programme is something that is discussed a lot, and the lack of connection with ITE. It probably should have crossed all boundaries, but yeah, that's a national conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. I think Marité is going to bring in her point in her closing remarks. So and really the discussion could be so lively here. I think we could be here for another half an hour, but I'm sure lunch is calling on all fronts. If I could just say a few words in closing myself. I think all of us feel the same, having been online since 9:30 this morning. There is a word in Irish that describes it very well, and it's called muinteras, which means a friendly collegiality and a togetherness. And I think that has been very exemplary this morning. I think in seeing all the old faces and collaborating with you again, it's important that we also fondly remember 2 former students who have sadly passed away. And I'd like to mention Niall O'Farrell, who graduated in 2011, and Aoife O'Sullivan, who graduated in 2016. And it's only fitting that we would remember them fondly today. Bannacht de Lobert. So it has indeed been a very engaging session. I suppose from my own point of view, Marité mapped out the development of the programme. From the point of view of teaching and learning Irish in Ireland, I think UL has addressed the way of bringing Irish into the languages programme very well. We have all benefited from this notion of teaching languages and creating language awareness of heritage language, minority language, Irish language, and modern and foreign language all together. And that is something that has happened very fruitfully and in a very innovative way along the way since the onset of the programme. If I could hand over to Marité just to make some closing remarks, I suppose I personally would like to particularly single out Marité. I think we might all agree that she is certainly an influencer, and an influencer in all the positive ways. She has been somebody that has been very positive to all of us as colleagues along the way in the programme, and I would like particularly to thank Marité for her ongoing energy and motivation and sense of creating a delight in addressing a new academic year every single year. It never loses its freshness. So, and thanks to all of our colleagues who've been involved in organising the event, and lovely to see you all and engage with you all again. So if I could hand over to Marité now just for some final comments.
Thanks, Deirdre. I was going to congratulate everyone, so now you have me taken back a bit. So, what we said when we started, I just say a few things, and then we go for the practical practical issues. What we said when we started is that we were complimenting you on being very engaged. Now I can say that I was very inspired. It's a word that came up a few times, so we have been very inspired by today. So as you know yourself, because you know me well at this stage, we cannot just do something and not look forward to something else and try to do something with it. So 2 things I'm proposing to you, everyone, and you'll see in a minute. So the first thing could be, if in the chat you want to answer, or we can do it through a feedback questionnaire, how would you feel if, after all what was said today, that we actually strengthen the network idea and create Language PME Facebook page. How would you feel about that? Do some of you want to react on the chat, or I can do we can do a small feedback questionnaire. We can do that. We can send you that through the Eventbrite email addresses. Are you able to hear me? Yep. Am I okay there? Because I
You're fine. We can hear
yeah,
you.
perfect. Thank you, because I couldn't. This is typical of online, you know. Yeah, with your students and this, you can hear me. No. Okay, so we'll start again. I was joking. So the one thing would be the idea of a Facebook page. The other thing, due to the fact that Gronia mentioned how we could be more active about certain things. For example, contacting Google about the Google Classroom delayed feedback and all that. What I propose here is that you could actually send me an email. So my email address is marie.batardiere@ul.ie. So if you send me an email, I could also add stuff on the Google Doc. If we don't manage to send you a Google Doc, again, via the Eventbrite email addresses, and on that Google Doc, we could actually have a compilation of all the various links that were given today. Is that fair enough? What it shows today is that you can actually take the lead in any situation. And when you think of it, that's exactly what you do with your students. So we basically gave you a voice. You know that was our main characteristic over the years. And I can see from what you have said here that you give students a voice also during your classes. And I'm very proud of that. So on another note, we are going to send you, or rather, if you want on request, because some of you don't want to, we can send you a certificate of attendance. That's for the practical side of things. So I think that I have it. So we'll have the Google Doc, we'll have the certificate of attendance for those who want to. We will create a Facebook page. I'm not sure that Instagram could work here. And I want to thank you again for being here with us today. And I hope we'll be doing it again maybe in 5 years' time. And in the meantime, we'll provide some CPD sessions in UL. Please God, if we all go back on campus. Au revoir et à bientôt tout le monde. Et merci beaucoup.